to Tumbleweed Tales and join us for the next story. Debbie Madison had seen death before. She had seen it in the slow, dignified way her father went, tucked into a bed with clean sheets, and a minister's prayer hovering over him like smoke. She had seen it sudden, the way young Caleb Prout had been thrown from his horse 3 summers back, and never got up from the dirt. She had seen it in small ways and hard ways, the way anyone who lived long enough on the frontier eventually did. But she had never stood in a crowd and watched a man wait for it. The gallows had been built at the north end of Blue Water's Main Street, just past the feed store, close enough to the bank that the shadow of the platform fell across the boardwalk every morning when the sun climbed right. Debbie had always thought that was deliberate, a reminder. She stood now among the gathered townspeople, hands folded at her waist, her dark school-teaching dress pressed and proper, her hair pinned back the way she always kept it. The way that told people she was a serious woman, a composed woman, a woman not given to displays. She was trying very hard to look composed now. The crowd around her was quiet, in that specific way crowds go quiet, when something heavy and irreversible is about to happen. Men she recognized, Hector Baines from the livery, old Pete Dunmore who ran the post, stood with their hats in their hands. Children crept forward and were pulled back by their mothers. Nobody was talking much. Nobody needed to. The air itself seemed to press down. The man on the platform was named John Tucker. Debbie only knew that because she had heard Sheriff Dylan Matthews say it twice in the past week. She did not know Tucker personally. Most people in Blue Water didn't. He had come through maybe 6 weeks ago, hired on at Arlo Kaufman's ranch as a hand, and that was about all anyone could say about him with certainty. What they said with less certainty, with the hot, fast certainty of rumor, was that he had killed Morris Kaufman's father, that he had taken money, that he had been standing over a dead man in a place he had no business being. Debbie had her doubts. She had been a school teacher for 11 years. And one thing 11 years of teaching children taught you was how to read a face. John Tucker did not look like a killer to her. He looked like a man who was tired and frightened and trying very hard not to show either one. He stood straight on the platform, rope around his neck, eyes moving out over the crowd, with a steadiness Debbie found more unsettling than weeping would have been. Sheriff Dylan Matthews climbed the 3 steps and stood beside him. Matthews was a fair man by most accounts, straight-backed, methodical, not given to cruelty. Debbie had always respected him. She watched him now and thought she saw something uncomfortable living behind his eyes, something that might have been doubt. "You've got anything to say?" Matthews asked. Tucker lifted his head. That steadiness again, that unsettling, particular calm. He looked out over them all these faces he barely knew, all these strangers who had come to see him off, and he said it plain and clear, "You're hanging the wrong man." A murmur rolled through the crowd. Debbie felt it more than she heard it, felt the shift in the air. Matthews didn't move. His face didn't change. "They all say that," he said quietly. Tucker shook his head, not frustrated, not pleading, just certain. "No," he said. "I'm telling you the shot came from somewhere above and behind the crowd. A single crack, sharp, clean. The rope jerked, then snapped. Tucker dropped. Hard, Debbie's hands came up to her mouth before she could stop them. He hit, rolled, and then he was moving. Scrambling up, and a second shot rang out. One of Matthews' deputies spun sideways and dropped hard into the dirt at the base of the gallows. After that, everything happened at once. The crowd broke open like a dropped jar. Women pulling children, men scattering, someone screaming. Debbie stumbled sideways with the surge of bodies, grabbed the hitching rail, held on, found her footing, and through the dust she looked up and saw him, the rider. He came in from the east end of the street at a dead run, horse cutting through the dust like a blade. No hesitation, no slowing. One hand on the reins, body low, canted sideways, and the way he sat, the way his weight settled into the saddle, the way his spine moved with the horse instead of against it, stopped something in Debbie Madison's chest. She knew that seat, 4 years since she had seen it. Calhoun County, the territorial fair. A young man working a cutting horse, effortless, precise, untouchable. She had been 26. She had watched him for an hour before she ever saw his face. Wade. The name arrived in her mind, complete, certain. Move, the rider called. Tucker was already running, already reaching. The rider leaned down, full gallop caught him, and in one motion too fast to follow, Tucker was in the saddle. And they were gone, gone into the dust, the confusion, the breaking crowd. The rope swung empty in the morning air. Debbie stood at the hitching rail, hand flat against the wood, heart hammering in her chest. Wade Coker, what on God's earth are you doing here? John Tucker had been on the back of a horse maybe a dozen times in his life, and this was the fastest any of them had ever moved. He held on to the rider's coat with both hands and did not say a word, because there was nothing sensible to say while the land blurred past and bullets were still theoretically possible. The rider, this man who had appeared out of nowhere and taken him off a hangman's platform, finally pulled up near a dry wash. A line of scrub cottonwoods gave some shade. Both of them breathing steady, alive, a condition Tucker had not expected to be in past 9 o'clock this morning. He slid down first, legs shaking, turned. The rider was pulling off his hat, and Tucker got a good look at him for the first time. Lean man, hard in the way the territory made men hard, not mean, settled into himself. Like something that had been through weather and come out the other side still standing. Dark hair, a few days of stubble. Eyes fixed on Tucker, the way a man looks at something he's just pulled out of a river, deciding if it was worth the effort. You took your time, Tucker said. The rider's expression shifted just slightly, the kind of shift that might have been amusement on a man more given to it. You weren't dead yet, he said. Wade Coker. Tucker let out a breath, one that had been sitting in his chest for about 3 days. You always did cut things close, only when it mattered. A pause settled between them. The cottonwoods moved, somewhere distant. A hawk turned lazy circles against a sky that had no idea what had just happened. You going to tell me why I just got hanged? Wade asked. Tucker sat down on the edge of the wash. His neck was raw where the rope had been. He resisted the urge to touch it. They needed someone, he said. For what? Murder. Tucker looked at his hands. Arlo Kaufman is dead, has been for about 5 weeks. His son Morris came back from up north and found him. Place had been turned over, some money missing out of a strongbox. And I was there. A pause. Not when it happened. After. I'd gone back to the ranch to collect my last week's wages and I found him. Stayed too long trying to figure out what to do. Morris showed up with 2 of his hands and there I was standing in the middle of it. Did you do it? Wade asked. Tucker lifted his eyes, held them steady. No. Wade looked at him for a long moment, not searching him, not exactly, more like confirming something. Then we go back, he said. Not yet. Tucker shook his head. They've got the wrong trail, and if we walk back in now, they won't care. Morris Kaufman has half that town convinced. The sheriff Matthews, he's a decent man, but decent men follow evidence. And right now, all the evidence points at me because someone put it there. Wade was quiet. You got a name for the man who did it? He asked. Tucker's jaw tightened. He had carried that name around for 2 weeks like a stone in his boot, knowing it and not being able to use it. Yes, he said. Wade put his hat back on. Then we get proof. Tucker looked at him, just like that. You got a better plan? He didn't. That's the plan, Wade said. They moved careful for the next 2 days. No straight roads, no towns. Just land and silence, and the particular kind of conversation that happens between men who have to trust each other completely, and are still working out whether they actually do. Tucker talked. Wade mostly listened. It came out plain, without decoration. The way a man tells a hard story when he's past the point of caring how it sounds. Arlo Kaufman had been a fair employer. Old rancher, worked his own land, didn't cheat on wages. His son Morris was another kind of man entirely. Had been gone 2 years up near the territorial capital. And the stories that came back about him were the kind that made a man keep his opinion to himself. Arlo had money, Tucker said. Real money, not just the ranch. He'd sold off some grazing rights to a railroad surveying company, and they'd paid him cash. He didn't trust banks, kept it in a strongbox in the house. Everybody who worked the place knew it was there. Morris knew it was there. "You're saying Morris killed his own father," Wade said. "I'm saying Arlo's dead, and the money's gone, and I found the body," Tucker said. "I'm also saying that 2 of the men in that camp we found, the ones with the fire, were riders who worked for Morris when he was still up north. I saw them there. I saw them talking to him out back of the Kaufman barn about 10 days before Arlo turned up dead." Wade turned that over. "You tell the sheriff this?" he asked. "I tried. Matthews is decent, like I said, but Morris Kaufman came back to town in grief, and grief looks a certain way. And I was a hired hand nobody knew, and it was easier." Tucker's voice was flat, not bitter, just flat. The way a man's voice gets when he's past the bitterness and arrived somewhere emptier. "They didn't want truth, they wanted it done." "Why you specifically?" Wade asked. Tucker's jaw tightened, held there a moment, then let go. "Because I don't belong anywhere," he said. "I got no people in this county, no one to speak for me, no wife, no kin." A pause. "A man without those things," he shook his head. "He's convenient." The word fell between them like a rock into water. Wade didn't answer. He rode for a stretch in silence, looking out at the middle distance, the way a man looks when something has touched him, somewhere he doesn't plan on mentioning. He had been that man once. He understood it. The particular vulnerability of belonging to no place, of being the kind of person who could disappear and leave behind only the faintest impression, like a boot print in dry ground. It was part of what had made him a writer for hire, and part of what had made him, over the last few years, want something else, though he wouldn't have said so out loud, and he had not yet found it. And he was not entirely sure he deserved it. He rode and thought about that, and said nothing. They found the camp 2 days out from Blue Water, hidden in a shallow canyon, where a dry creek had cut through red limestone and left enough cover that a man who didn't want to be found wouldn't be. There were horses picketed at the far end. A fire going, in daylight. These men had stopped caring about being cautious. Wade watched from the ridge above, belly flat in the scrub, the sun on the back of his neck. 3 of them, he said. 4, Tucker said beside him. "One's inside that lean-to." A pause. Wade shifted his eye line. "Leader, the one by the fire." Tucker's voice had dropped to nearly nothing. "That's Hitch Brander. He ran Morris's crew up north. The 2 sitting on the log worked for him. I don't know the one in the lean-to." "Does it matter?" Wade asked. To a jury it might. Wade considered that. Thought about what Tucker had said about Matthews being a decent man. Decided to believe it. "We take them alive if we can," he said. "But Brander won't come easy." "No," Tucker said, "he won't." They moved down slow, picking their way through the limestone breaks, staying below the sight line of the camp. The mid-afternoon heat had settled everything into a kind of stupor. The horses drowsy, the men at the fire half-glazed, the one in the lean-to invisible, presumably asleep, then fast. Wade came around the edge of the rock and the camp was right there. "Don't move," he said. Loud, clear. For half a second it might have gone the quiet way. But Hitch Brander was not a man who gave up anything quietly. He came up off his log fast, faster than a man that relaxed had any right to be. The gun was already in his hand, and then the world shrank, down to the distance between 2 men, and what happened in the next 2 seconds. The shot from Wade's gun cracked across the canyon walls. One man dropped before he could stand. Another reached for his gun. Took too long. Tucker had him. Coming in from the other side, weapon leveled. The third bolted for the horses, made it 20 yards before his legs stopped working, the way legs are supposed to. Brander's bullet passed close enough that Wade felt it. Not hit, close. His own shot was cleaner. One round, clean as a line drawn on paper. Brander went down hard and didn't get up. The dust settled. The canyon went quiet, except for the sound of horses pulling nervous at their lines. The man in the lean-to, it turned out, had slept through the first 3 shots. Came stumbling out, blinking on the 4th. Tucker had him before he was fully awake. He was young, younger than Tucker had expected. And when he understood what was happening, he sat down in the dirt, put his hands up, and kept them there. Tucker stood over Brander for a long moment. The man's eyes were still open, still carrying that same flatness dangerous men have, like they've looked at too much and stopped being surprised by any of it. "That's him," Tucker said, not triumphant, not relieved. Just certain, the way a man gets certain when something he's known for weeks finally becomes visible to everyone else. Wade stepped up beside him. "Then we go finish it," he said. They rode back into blue water at daylight 2 days later. They didn't hide. They didn't sneak in by a back road. They came down the main street at a walk, Wade in front, Tucker just behind, the surviving man from the camp riding between them with his hands tied to his saddle horn. Debbie Madison saw them from her schoolroom window. She had not slept well in 4 days, and she had spent 2 of those days telling herself that what she'd seen through the dust and chaos of the hanging, that particular seat, that particular way of riding, had been her imagination, had been the stress of the moment playing tricks on her, had been a shape that looked like something it wasn't, but she had not quite convinced herself. When she saw the rider come down the center of Blue Water's Main Street in the early morning light, she pressed her hand flat against the window glass and stared, and she was certain. Wade Coker. She watched him ride. She watched the way he sat the horse, loose and settled and utterly unhurried, as if all the trouble in the world could arrange itself around him, and he would simply move through it at his own pace. She had watched him that way once before at a fair, at 26 years old, when she had been a different kind of foolish. She watched him now at 30, and felt something stir in her chest that she was old enough to recognize and not quite old enough to stop. Word spread through the town in that fast, invisible way that news always travels in small places. By the time Wade and Tucker reached the middle of the street, there were men on both sides of the boardwalk and more coming. Sheriff Matthews came out of his office with his deputy, a new one, the other still laid up, and stood square in the street, his face unreadable. "You've got nerve coming back," he said. Wade didn't answer. He sat the horse and let the silence work. It was Tucker who stepped forward. He dismounted and walked up to Matthews until they were close enough that what he said next was half private. "I told you," Tucker said. "You had the wrong man." Matthews looked at him. Long and hard, in the way of a man who has been uncomfortable for several days and is either about to get more comfortable or considerably less. "Then prove it," he said. Wade reached into his coat and removed the satchel. He didn't drop it dramatically. He leaned down from the saddle and placed it in the dirt in front of Matthews, and then he reached into his shirt pocket and held out something else. Small, heavy. A badge, not an official one, not any department's issue, but the kind that certain men use as an informal mark of allegiance, of affiliation with a particular operation. Matthews picked it up and looked at it for a long time. The badge had a notch filed in one edge, and there was dried blood on the back, and Sheriff Dylan Matthews had seen one like it before. 3 years back, up near the northern county line, when a man named Brander had been involved in a land grab that nobody could quite prove and everybody knew about. He looked up. "You're saying," he started. "Hitch Brander killed Arlo Kaufman," Wade said. "Morris sent him to do it. The money in that satchel is what was taken from Kaufman's strongbox. You'll find a young man waiting outside of town, with my markings on his saddle who'll testify to all of it. And the other 2 men from Brander's camp are in the ground at Canyon Wash southeast of here, if you want to send someone to confirm." The silence that followed was the kind that can go several ways at once, and everyone present knows it. Matthews looked at the satchel, looked at the badge, looked at Tucker. Then he looked at his town, all these faces watching, waiting, the whole weight of a community holding its breath to see which way a decent man would fall. "You're clear," he said to Tucker. Just like that, no ceremony, no apology, just the plain settling of a fact that should have been settled differently to begin with. Matthews was a decent man. He knew what he'd nearly done. It lived in his face in a way Debbie, watching from the edge of the crowd, recognized as the particular expression of a man who will spend years paying himself back for a mistake. The crowd broke slowly, the way crowds break when the thing they've just witnessed was more serious than they expected. No cheering, just people drifting away. Back toward the ordinary shapes of their days, subdued, thoughtful, in the way that blue water would be for some weeks to come. Debbie sensed that. She did not go back to the ordinary shape of her day. She stood at the edge of the boardwalk, watched Wade Coker climb down from his horse, hand the reins off to no one in particular. He stood there in the street, looked around, at the feed store, the post office, the bank, at the gallows still standing at the north end, at the mountains above the rooftops. The way a man looks at something he's assessing. She waited until the crowd thinned. Then she walked toward him. He turned before she reached him. His eyes found hers. And there was a fraction of a second, just a fraction, where something crossed his face. She filed it away, carefully. "Hello, Wade," she said. He looked at her, that long reading look. "Debbie Madison," he said, and there was something in his voice that matched what she had filed away. "You're a long way from Calhoun County. So are you. I go where the work is. Is that all?" He didn't answer right away, a beat longer than the question required. "I came because I got a letter," he said, "from a man who said he was going to hang for something he didn't do. Said he needed someone to come untangle it." A pause. "That's the honest version. And the less honest version," he looked at her, in a way that made her wish she had thought before speaking, but she was 30 years old, a school teacher. And she had spent 11 years saying the honest thing in clear words. She wasn't about to stop now. "I'd heard you were here," he said quietly. "Heard it about 3 weeks before the letter came." Debbie looked at him for a long moment, the morning light doing something particular to the dust in the street between them. "Come have coffee," she said. "You look like you haven't sat down in a week." The corner of his mouth moved, barely, but she caught it. "That be something," Wade Coker said. He didn't leave that week. Debbie had not expected him to, or rather, she had told herself firmly that she had no expectations at all. That Wade Coker was the kind of man who rode toward things and then rode away from them. And that was simply the kind of man he was, and she was a practical woman who understood the world as it actually functioned. But he didn't leave. He took a room at the boarding house run by Ida Marsh, east side of town, put his horse in the livery. And the following Tuesday she looked out the schoolroom window, saw him helping old Pete Dunmore replace a rotted section of fence, shirt sleeves, afternoon heat. Working with the quiet competence of a man who doesn't need to be asked twice. That evening she walked past, on her way home from school. "I didn't know fence work was in your skill set," she said. He looked up, sawdust on his forearm. "It isn't," he said. "Pete's teaching me. And what's Pete getting out of it? Company mostly. He says." She had stopped walking without quite deciding to. The light was going amber behind him, that kind of late afternoon gold that made blue water look better than it deserved. "You could do worse than this town," she said. Came out more plainly than she'd intended. He looked at her. "I know it," he said, just as plain. She walked home, made supper. Marked 12 arithmetic papers. Thought about nothing in particular with tremendous focus. For most of the evening. In the days that followed, the town arranged itself around him. The way towns do with men who stay, tentatively at first, then more naturally feeling him out. Matthews came to him with a problem, a man threatening a family. Wade handled it. Quiet. No dramatics. After Matthews said nothing, just nodded once, and it carried weight. Tucker watched all of it from a careful distance. John Tucker had decided to stay too. He hadn't said it out loud. He just stopped leaving. Took a job at the livery. Hector Baines needed help. Tucker was good with horses. The way men get after years with them. He found a room above the saddle shop. Started putting roots down. Small ones. The way a man does when he thinks a place might hold him. He watched Wade and Debbie with quiet interest. The kind a man has when he's doing something important and doesn't quite know if he should say it out loud. Some evenings, he sat on the front step, mail-order bride catalogs in his hands. Didn't know when he started collecting them. They just showed up. Pete set them aside for him, didn't ask why. The kind of kindness that knows better than to ask. He'd read them. Schoolteacher. Homemaker, seamstress, widow, and he'd think about writing back. Here is who I am, here is where I am, here is what I'm trying to build. For most of his life, he hadn't had enough to fill those sentences. Maybe now he did. Maybe the job, the room, the town. Maybe that was enough to begin. One evening he looked up. Saw Wade and Debbie walking together, across the street. Not touching, not even that close, but moving in that way where two people are aware of every step the other takes. Where the space between them isn't empty, just not spoken yet. Tucker watched, felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been tight for years. He had said it once out in the open country that he didn't belong anywhere, and he had meant it. But here in the evening light watching two people build something, he thought maybe he'd been looking at it wrong. He looked back down at the catalog, turned a page. That evening, the town moved different, quieter, more settled, like a body of water after something has disturbed it and the ripples have finally reached the shore and spent themselves there. Tucker sat on the step of the saddle shop, catalog closed in his hand, not reading, just watching the street in the blue going dark. The gallows at the north end were a shadow now, just a shape. Someone would take them down. Eventually, the space would return to something ordinary, and in 10 years maybe the children who had been dragged away from wagon wheels would barely remember. He touched the side of his neck, where the rope had been. The rawness was mostly gone now. It would scar, he suspected in a way that didn't quite show, the kind that stays inside. Wade stood in the street, far end, looking out at the mountains going dark above the rooftops. Debbie had said good night a few minutes ago, gone inside. Tucker had watched her go. Watched the way she paused on the porch step, looked back, and the way Wade had stood there watching until the door closed. "You didn't have to come back," Tucker called, across the distance. Wade turned, took a few steps forward, stopped in the middle of the street where the last of the light was. "Yes," he said. "I did." Tucker considered that. "Because of the job?" he asked. A pause. The kind Wade used instead of half answers. "Because it wasn't finished," he said. Tucker looked at him, then at the dark porch where Debbie's lamp had come on behind the curtain. "Which part?" he asked. Wade didn't answer right away, long enough that Tucker didn't expect one. "Then several parts." Tucker nodded. That was honest enough. He opened the catalog, new page. A woman in Virginia, steady, plain-spoken, not afraid of hard work. Sounded right, exactly right. He read her letter twice. Turned to the back page, instructions, thought about what he'd write. The sun had dropped now, below the mountains. Blue water settled into night, a door closing here. A lamp coming on there, dishes somewhere, a horse shifting in the livery. Wade stayed in the street. A while longer, just looking at it all. A place that had nearly buried the truth, nearly buried a man with it, and in the end had been given back something it hadn't known it needed. Not a lawman. Not a savior, just a man who had come for one reason and stayed for several. He thought about Debbie Madison, the way she spoke, clear, no apology. He thought about the coffee. The morning he rode back in, the way she listened, the way the conversation had gone longer than expected. He thought about sitting in a town at dusk and not planning which direction to leave in the morning. It was unfamiliar. He decided he wasn't opposed to it. Tucker looked up. Saw Wade still standing there. "You going to keep standing in the street," he said, "or are you going to go knock on that door?" Wade looked at him, sideways. "I'll get around to it," he said. Tucker smiled. First real one in a while, felt strange. He thought he'd practice it. "Town could use one like you," he said, same words as before, but they carried more now. More weight, more room. Wade looked at the lamplight, behind Debbie's curtain. "Maybe," he said, same word, but it didn't sound like maybe. It sounded like yes. The night settled over blue water, soft, complete. In the morning there would be fence to finish, letters to write, conversation still waiting. But for now the street was quiet, the rope was empty, and everything sat exactly where it belonged. For more stories from the Old West, subscribe to Tumbleweed Tales and join us for the next story. They left him alive on purpose. That was the mistake. The smoke had already thinned by the time he woke. Not gone, just enough to let him breathe and understand. Eli Carter didn't move at first. Didn't try to sit up. Didn't reach for the pistol that wasn't there. He just listened. Whined through broken wood. The slow crackle of something still burning, and nothing else. No horses, no men. No voices. He opened his eyes. The sky was wrong, too bright, too open. That meant the roof was gone. He turned his head. Slow, careful, the world tilted, then steadied, and that's when he saw it. The house, or what was left of it, collapsed inward like something had punched it down from the sky. Blackened beams, ash drifting, the porch gone, the door gone, everything gone. Eli pushed himself up. His left arm shook, his ribs screamed. Didn't matter, he got to his knees anyway. "Mary," the word came out dry, like it had been waiting too long. No answer. He tried again. Louder, "Mary," still nothing. He stood, barely. Each step felt like it came through mud and broken glass, but he moved. Because standing still meant knowing, and he wasn't ready for that yet. The front room was open to the sky. Furniture overturned, tables split in half, glass everywhere. He stepped through it, didn't feel it, didn't care. "Mary," then he saw the blood, not scattered. Not chaotic, a trail, dragged. Eli stopped, looked at it, followed it with his eyes across the floor, through what used to be the doorway, out toward the yard. No, he followed anyway. The wind picked up, carried ash across his boots, across the trail, trying to erase it but not fast enough. He found her just past the fence. Mary Carter still on her side, dress torn. Hair matted with blood. Eli didn't run to her, didn't fall, didn't shout. He walked, slow, like every step mattered. He knelt beside her, reached out, stopped. His hand hovered just above her shoulder. Then he touched her, gently, like she might still feel it, cold. His jaw tightened. That was all. No tears, no shaking, just a slow tightening. He turned her slightly, enough to see her face. And that's when it changed, because this wasn't just death. This was done to her. Eli closed his eyes just for a second. Then he opened them again. Different who? The wind didn't answer, but the ground did. Hoof prints, 4, maybe 5 riders, heavy horses, not passing through. They had stopped, stayed. Eli looked at them. Tracked the direction, burned it into his mind. Then he looked back at Mary. "I'm not burying you yet." A pause. "Not until I know their names." He stood. The man who had built that house was gone. What stood in his place was something else, and it was moving. They didn't take his horse. That told him everything. Eli stood at the edge of the yard looking at the empty hitch post. The rope still hung loose, cut clean. They hadn't needed the horse. They hadn't needed anything. They came for one reason, did what they came to do, and left on purpose. Eli stepped toward the barn, each step steadier now, pain still there, but pushed down. Filed away. The barn doors were open, one hanging crooked, the other burned black along the edge. Inside, the smell hit first, smoke, blood, and something heavier. Eli walked in, didn't hesitate. The stall was empty, but not untouched. The ground was torn up, boot prints everywhere, signs of struggle, and in the far corner a body. Eli stopped. Caleb. The boy couldn't have been more than 16. Worked the ranch for 2 seasons. Good kid, fast with a horse, always laughing, not anymore. Eli didn't move closer, didn't need to. This wasn't a robbery, wasn't random. This was a message, and Eli knew something else. They wanted me alive. He said it out loud to the empty barn, to the dead, to himself. Because men like this didn't make mistakes. They didn't leave witnesses, unless the witness was the point. Eli turned, walked out. The sun was higher now, burning off the last of the smoke. Revealing everything. The ranch destroyed, the life gone. Eli didn't look back. He went to the well, pulled water, washed his face, his hands, the blood, slow, methodical. Then he walked to the tool shed. The door was still standing, untouched. Inside, his rifle still there, leaning exactly where he left it. Eli picked it up, checked the chamber, loaded. He grabbed the ammo box, filled his pockets, took the knife from the shelf, strapped it on. No rush, no wasted motion. Then he stepped back outside. He looked once more toward the field, toward Mary. "I'll come back." A pause, but not like I was. He turned, walked to the horse, mounted, and followed the tracks. No anger in his face, no rage, just direction, and that was worse. The tracks led north. That narrowed it down, but not enough. Eli rode slow, not because he had to, because he wanted to see everything. 5 horses, he was sure of it now, one heavier than the rest. Big animal, deep cut in the earth with every step. Lead rider. They hadn't bothered to hide anything. No circling, no splitting off. No attempt to break trail. They wanted to be followed. Eli let that settle, didn't fight it, didn't question it. "If you want me," a breath. "You've got me." He nudged the horse forward. The land opened up as he rode. Low hills, dry grass. Wind pushing steady out of the west. Good ground for tracking, bad ground for hiding. 2 hours passed, maybe more. Eli didn't count, didn't need to. What he needed was certainty. And then he saw it. Smoke, not from a house, not from a chimney. Camp smoke. Eli pulled the horse up, watched it from a distance, let his breathing slow, let his mind settle. 5 riders. Now 5 shadows moving through the haze. They weren't hiding, they weren't worried, they were waiting. Eli slid down from the saddle, tied the horse off behind a low ridge. Then he dropped to the ground, moved forward on foot. Low, quiet, deliberate. The closer he got, the clearer it became. Not just men, armed men, relaxed, laughing. One of them tossed something into the fire. Cloth. Eli's eyes narrowed. He didn't need to get closer to know. Mary's dress. Something shifted in him, not rage, not yet, something colder. He counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. Eli stilled. Eyes locking onto the last one, the big horse, the heavy tracks, the man sitting apart from the others, not laughing. Not drinking, just watching, that was the one. Eli stayed low, studied them, memorized faces, positions, weapons, no rush. He wasn't here to fight, not yet. He was here to learn. And what he learned was worse than he expected, because one of them spoke, loud enough to carry. "You think he's coming?" A pause, then the big man answered. "Oh, he's coming." A faint smile. "They always do." Eli didn't move, didn't breathe. The man leaned forward slightly, staring into the fire. "When he gets here," another pause, "we finish it." Eli's jaw tightened, not revenge. A plan, and he was walking into it. Good, so were they. Eli didn't go back for the horse. He circled wide instead. kept low, stayed in the grass, used the land the way it was meant to be used. The men in the camp never looked his way. Never thought they needed to. That was their second mistake. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretched, light softened, and Eli waited. He watched them eat, watched them drink, watched them grow slower. Looser, but not the big one. That man never relaxed, never laughed, never turned his back fully to anything. Eli marked that, filed it away. That's the one who finishes it. He understood now. The others, they were hands, noise, violence, but that one was the reason. The light dropped further, orange fading to blue. Eli moved, not toward the fire, away from it, toward the horses. 6 of them tied loose, grazing. Eli crouched low, moved between them slow and steady. Let them smell him, kept them calm. Then he reached the first saddle, checked it. Ammo, water, knife. He took the knife, left everything else, moved to the next, same, then the third. This time he cut the strap, slow, silent, let the saddle slip loose. The horse shifted. Eli steadied it. Hand firm on its neck, easy, easy. Then he moved on. By the time he finished, 3 saddles would fall the moment weight hit them. He stepped back, looked once, then turned, and moved again. Back toward the ridge, back toward his rifle. Now he was ready. He settled into position, prone, rifle steady, eyes locked on the camp. The fire burned low, voices quieter now. And then movement. One of the men stood, stretched, reached for his horse. Eli watched, waited. The man swung up into the saddle and the saddle dropped, hard. The man hit the ground, cursing. The others laughed. At first, then Eli fired. The first shot took the laughing one in the throat. Silence hit faster than the echo. Then chaos. Men scrambling, reaching, shouting. Eli chambered another round. Fired again. Second man dropped before he found his gun. Now they understood. This wasn't a hunt. They were the ones being hunted. And somewhere in the chaos the big man stood, not running, not shouting, looking right toward Eli and smiling. Eli moved before the smile finished, rolled left, down behind the ridge. A bullet cracked over the spot where his head had been. The big man was fast, faster than Eli hoped. Good. That meant he was worth killing last. Eli crawled through the dry grass. Low, quiet, rifle pulled tight against his chest. Behind him the camp exploded into panic. Men yelling, horses screaming. Boots pounding dirt. Another shot tore into the ridge, then another. They didn't know where he was now, so they fired at where he had been. Eli kept moving. He came up behind a fallen cottonwood. Set the rifle across the bark, breathed once, twice. Then he saw the third man running for the horses. Eli fired. The man folded before he reached the reins. 3 down, 3 left. The big man shouted something Eli couldn't make out. The other 2 scattered. One went toward the creek bed, one toward the rocks, smart enough, but late. Eli slipped backward into the darkening grass. He didn't chase the first man, didn't chase the second. He went after the one who had gone quiet, because quiet men were dangerous. The creek bed curved east, dry except for a thin ribbon of muddy water. Eli followed from above, step by step, listening. A pebble shifted, then silence. Eli stopped, raised the rifle. "Come on out," a voice called from below, shaking, trying not to. Eli didn't answer. "You killed 3 men already." A pause. "You done enough." Eli's face didn't change. "No," the man fired toward the sound. Eli had already moved. His shot came from 6 feet to the right. The creek bed went quiet, 4 down. Eli stood there for a moment, listening to the wind, listening for the others. Then a voice came from behind him, deep, calm, close. "You're better than I was told." Eli turned slowly. The big man stood 20 yards away, rifle lowered, hat brim shadowing his eyes. "Who told you?" Eli asked. The big man smiled. "Your brother." And for the first time since waking in the ashes, Eli felt something break through the cold. Not fear, not grief, recognition. Eli didn't speak, not right away. The name came before the face. Harlan, his brother, had been gone 8 years. gone after their father died, gone after the land was split, gone after Eli refused to sell. Harlan had ridden off with whiskey in his blood and hate in his mouth. Eli had thought that was the end of it. He was wrong. The big man watched him closely. Enjoying it. There it is, he said. That look. Eli's fingers tightened around the rifle. Where is he? The big man shook his head. Not here. A pause. He wanted you alive enough to understand. Eli took one step forward. The big man raised his rifle halfway, not aiming, warning, careful. Eli stopped. The last surviving rider shouted from somewhere in the rocks. Boss! The big man didn't look away from Eli. Run, he said. At first Eli thought he meant him. Then he realized. The man in the rocks was already running. The big man had cut him loose. A messenger. Eli understood, so did the big man. You want him followed, Eli said. The smile faded slightly. You catch on quick. Eli looked past him toward the fading hoofbeats. The last rider was heading west, toward town or toward Harlan. The big man backed away, still facing Eli. You got a choice now. His voice stayed calm, almost friendly. Come after me or go after the truth. Eli lifted the rifle. The big man was already moving. Smoke burst from his gun. Eli felt heat cut across his shoulder. Not deep enough. He fired back, missed by inches. The big man disappeared into the brush. For 1 second, Eli almost followed, almost gave in. But then he saw Mary's face. Saw Caleb in the barn, saw the house open to the sky. No, he needed the root, not the branch. Eli turned, whistled for his horse. Mounted with blood running down his sleeve. Then he rode west, after the messenger, after Harlan, after the reason. He caught the rider before midnight, not by speed, by patience. A scared horse runs hard, then gives out. A steady horse lasts. Eli found him near a dry wash trying to change mounts at a line shack. The man had one hand on the saddle, the other on a bottle. Eli stepped out of the dark. Where's Harlan? The bottle slipped from the man's hand, shattered. I don't know. Eli raised the rifle. The man swallowed. I swear. Eli cocked the hammer. Try again. The man's face folded. All the hard left him. Old mining camp. A breath. North of Bitter Creek. Eli stared at him. How many? 8, maybe 10. Is my brother there? The man hesitated. Too long. Eli stepped closer. He was there when we left. That was enough. The man lifted both hands. I didn't touch your wife. Eli's eyes went still. The man knew then he had said the wrong thing. Who did? No answer. Eli stepped closer again. Who did? The man whispered it. Harlan. The world narrowed to a single point. Eli heard nothing after that. Not the wind, not the horse, not the man crying, only that name. Harlan. Eli lowered the rifle. For a moment the rider thought mercy had come. It hadn't. Eli hit him once with the rifle stock, hard enough to drop him. Then he tied the man to the hitching post. Alive. You can tell anyone who comes through. Eli leaned close. Tell them Eli Carter is coming. A pause. And tell my brother, his voice lowered. He should have killed me when he had the chance. The old mining camp sat in a bowl of stone. Dead buildings, black windows, one road in, one road out. Harlan always did like places that looked already damned. Eli reached the ridge before dawn. He didn't ride down, didn't announce himself, didn't make one heroic mistake. He watched, counted men, counted horses, counted guns, 9 plus Harlan and the big man from the camp. So he had come back. Good. Eli waited until the first gray light touched the roofs. Then he started with the horses, not killing them, never that. He cut them loose, spooked them just enough. Sent them scattering out through the rocks. By the time the first man shouted, Eli was already at the powder shed. He lit the fuse, walked away. 20 seconds later, the morning split open. The explosion tore through the camp. Men ran half-dressed into the street, coughing, blind, confused. Eli shot the first one, then the second, the rest dove for cover. But there was no cover Eli hadn't already studied. He moved through the camp like a man walking through a memory. Cold, certain, unstoppable. By sunrise, only 3 men were left. The big man, Harlan, and Eli. The big man came first, standing in the middle of the dirt street, gun low, face calm. "You know," he said, "your brother paid good." Eli stepped into the street. "He should have paid better." The big man drew, fast. Eli was faster. The shot hit center chest. The big man took one step back, then another. He looked almost surprised. Then he fell. Harlan came out of the old assay office with a pistol in one hand and Mary's wedding ring in the other. Eli saw it. That small gold circle, dull with ash. Everything in him went quiet. Harlan smiled. But it was weak now, thin, scared around the edges. "You always thought you were better than me." Eli walked toward him. "No." Harlan lifted the pistol. His hand shook. Eli didn't stop. "I just became better than you." Harlan fired, missed. Eli shot him in the leg. Harlan screamed and dropped. Eli kicked the pistol away, then bent down, took Mary's ring from his brother's hand. Harlan looked up at him, bleeding, begging now without saying the word. Eli stared at him. For one long moment he saw the boy Harlan had been, his brother, barefoot in summer dust. Laughing near the creek, before greed, before hate, before this. Then he saw Mary, cold in the grass. Eli raised the rifle. "You made me bury my wife." A pause. "Now I bury my brother." The shot rolled across the empty camp, then faded into the hills. Eli stood there until the smoke cleared. Then he turned, walked back to his horse. By noon he was home. The ranch was still burned, the house still ruined, the dead still waiting, but the wind felt different now. Not kinder, just finished. Eli buried Caleb first, beneath the cottonwood near the barn. Then he buried Mary on the rise facing east, where she used to watch the morning come in. He placed the ring in his palm, held it there a long while, then pressed it into the earth above her. "I came back," he said. The wind moved through the grass, soft, almost like an answer. Eli stood, looked at the ashes of the home he had built. Then he picked up a hammer. Not because the pain was gone. It was. Not because he was healed, he was, but because some men break, some men run, some men die with the life they lost. And some men, when pushed too far, become the thing no evil man survives. Eli Carter drove the first nail before sundown. And when the sound echoed across the empty ranch, it did not sound like building. It sounded like warning. For more stories from the Old West, subscribe to Tumbleweed Tales and join us for the next story. The St. Louis Building and Savings Association had stood on the corner of 4th and Market for 11 years. Brick facade, iron window grates. The kind of building that said permanence to the men who deposited their savings in it, and looked like good odds to the men who studied it from the street. Colt Varner had studied it for 3 days. He was a patient man when patience served him. It had served him well enough over the years. He had ridden with Sherman from Atlanta to the sea, 285 miles of burning Georgia, a scorched corridor through the heart of the Confederacy. Colt had been there for all of it. He had watched farmhouses go up, watched men do things to the land and to the people on it that they would spend the rest of their lives either justifying or forgetting. He had done some of those things himself, and somewhere in the smoke and the ruin he had found that he did not feel much about any of it. That was the part he had taken home with him. The war ended. The country tried to forget. Colt Varner did not try. He started with stagecoaches, then trains. And when he understood that banks held more money in a single room than a dozen coaches, he moved up again. He was not reckless. He planned. He thought. He brought men he trusted. Which was not the same as men he liked. There were 4 of them. Sam Rickard, lean, quick, a pickpocket's instincts, never flinched at gunfire. Carl Malone, broad, slow, 5 years in prison. Came out harder, handled horses better than anyone. And then C.J. Scott, Nobody knew where he came from. He had appeared after the war the way some men did, without explanation, without origin. As if he had been assembled out of what the war left behind. He did not look like a man who enjoyed violence. He had something quieter than that, something more deliberate. He killed the way other men solved problems, efficient, without sentiment, already decided before the question was even asked. Colt was careful around him. He never said so, but he was. The morning of the robbery was cloudless, bright, flat, the kind of day that made everything look clean and forgiven. They rode in from 3 directions, timed within 90 seconds, just as planned. Sam and Carl stayed with the horses. Colt and CJ went inside. 11 people in the bank, 3 tellers, a manager, 7 customers, a woman counting coins, 2 men talking near the door. A young family and a boy no older than 6. Colt drew his gun. Down, all of you, on the floor. Nobody gets hurt who doesn't choose to. They obeyed. They always did at first. Fear came first. Fight came later, if it came at all. CJ moved along the cage. The drawers opened. Money gathered. Colt watched the room, not the ones obeying, the ones thinking. He saw it. A man near the back wall. Mid-30s. A working man, the kind with a wife at home. Children maybe, a man who had something to weigh. His hand moved toward his coat, slowly, not decided yet. CJ. Shot him once. The sound filled the room, huge, final. A woman screamed. The boy cried. The man went down and did not get back up. Colt looked at CJ. CJ was already looking at the tellers. Finish. They did. They ran out into the street, the bag heavy with coin and bills, horses ready. Movement clean, mounted and gone within a minute of the first shot. 40 miles northeast of the city, the land opened up. Long grass, rolling hills, sky wide enough to make a man feel small in a good way. Terry Scott and Larry Fielder were pulling wire. They had been at it since before sunup, fixing fence, resetting posts, the kind of work that didn't require talking but brought it anyway. You ever going to say something to her? Terry didn't look up. Drove a staple, took his time. Working up to it. You've been working up to it since we were 14. I'm aware. Larry shook his head, not unkindly. They had grown up the same way, same land, same dirt. Same missing fathers. Terry's never came back from the war. Larry's made it home, but not for long. It was something they didn't talk about, didn't have to. Larry had a gift with horses. Real gift. Not learned, something deeper. People came from counties away to buy from him. Terry had his own gift. He could shoot, not just hit something, read it, react before it happened. He didn't brag about it, didn't talk about it, just kept it ready. By midday the work was done, tools loaded. Horses turned toward town. They passed the house, saw her in the garden, Emma Fielder. Working the rows, hair pulled back, loose at the edges. She looked up, smiled, and the whole place shifted around her. Terry tipped his hat. Ma'am. She raised an eyebrow. Don't you ma'am me, Terry Scott. I've known you since you ate a pine cone on a dare. That was Larry's dare. It was, Larry said. They rode on. She watched them go, quiet, knowing. She had always known. Not because he told her, because she didn't need him to. She was waiting, not uncertain, just patient. Some things had their own time. This was one of them. The Last Chance Saloon sat in the middle of Main Street like a place that had earned its name. Dim inside, cool, smelled of sawdust and old whiskey. Terry and Larry stepped in, ordered beers. Larry drank half of his in one pull, set it down. I need to get to the post office. Waiting on a letter. Go on, Terry said. I'll be here. Larry stepped back out into the sunlight and crossed the street. Terry turned back to his drink, thinking about the fence, about Emma. About the years he had spent not saying what he should have said. He heard the shot, not clearly, muffled through brick, but the body knows that sound. He was already moving, out of the chair. Through the doors, 4 men came out of the bank at a run, 2 already mounted, 2 moving fast. Larry was in the street, turning, seeing it. His hand went for his gun. He was good with horses. Not fast enough with a gun. The shot hit him before he cleared leather. He dropped hard, flat in the street. Terry fired from the doorway, one clean motion. The quiet one, the dangerous one, took a hit to the shoulder, but he stayed in the saddle. They were gone seconds later, gone like it never mattered. Terry was already running. Larry was on his back. Blood spreading through his coat, too much, too fast. Terry dropped beside him, lifted him. Larry. Larry found his eyes, barely. Take care of Emma. That was it, no speech, no warning. Just gone like a lamp burning out. Terry stayed there in the street, hands on his friend. And nothing in the world moved forward again the same way it had before. They buried Larry Fielder 3 days later, on a hill at the south edge of his own land, where the ground sloped down toward the creek and the old oaks threw shade in the afternoon. Emma chose the spot. She chose everything, the service, the preacher, the words on the stone. She did it the way she did everything that mattered, with her hands steady, and her grief kept quiet where no one else could see it. The service was short. The people stayed long enough to mean it and left soon after. When they were gone, it was just the two of them. Terry stood with his hat in his hands, looking down at the turned earth. Emma stood beside him, close but not touching. Her eyes were dry, not because she didn't feel it, but because she had already felt it alone. Terry spoke plain. "I'm going after them, the men that did this. I'll bring them back, or I'll leave them dead in the dirt." He paused. "When I come back, there's a conversation you and I are long overdue for." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Then I'll hold you to that. No softness in it, no hesitation." She meant it. And for the first time, Terry understood something he hadn't let himself believe before. She wasn't being polite. She was giving him a chance. He put his hat on, walked to his horse. Didn't trust himself to say anything else. He left before sunup. The kind of leaving a man does when he doesn't want to be argued with. Horse saddled, rifle set, supplies packed. A direction and a purpose. He stepped out into the gray light and stopped. Emma was sitting on his porch, dressed to ride, bedroll beside her, saddlebags ready. "No, good morning to you too, Emma. I can shoot, I can ride, I can keep up." She tilted her head slightly. "What exactly is your objection?" "My objection is that these men are dangerous." "Yes," she said, "I know. Larry's buried on our hill." That ended the argument. They stood there a long moment. Then Terry turned and saddled his horse. Not agreement, but it didn't matter. She was coming. They rode out together. The first hour passed in silence. Cold air, empty road, morning light stretching across the land. Terry rode and thought about Larry, about the street, about the sound of him hitting the ground. The kind of thing a man doesn't forget. Emma broke the silence. "He talked about you all the time. We talked about a lot of things. He said you were the most capable man he knew." She paused. "He also said you were the most stubborn." Terry almost smiled. He wasn't wrong. He glanced at her. She rode steady, easy, like she had always belonged there. "Thank you for coming." It cost him something to say it. "I know," she said. The trail wasn't hard to follow. One horse dragging slightly, loose shoe, clear sign. They moved south, then west. Not the direction Terry expected. "He's careful," Emma said. "He's had practice." "What about the quiet one?" Terry didn't look at her right away. "He's the one who shot Larry." Emma held that. Didn't flinch. "All right," she said. Days settled into rhythm. Ride, track, camp, repeat. Emma handled camp like she'd been doing it her whole life. Food hot, fire small, efficient. Better than Terry would have managed alone. "You're just now noticing," she said one night. "I've been distracted." She handed him a plate, sat across the fire. The night was cold, still. "Terry, yeah, when you said at the grave, about that conversation, you meant it." "Yes." Silence settled between them. "Then, I've loved you." He stopped, started again. "I've loved you for a long time. Since I knew what it meant. I didn't say anything, because I didn't think I had the right." Emma looked at him, steady, clear. "I know. Which part?" All of it, she held his eyes, I've known for years. I was waiting for you to catch up. He sat with that. You could have said something. It wasn't mine to say, a small smile. You took your time, he almost laughed. Instead, he moved closer. She leaned into him. And they stayed like that until the fire burned down. No rush, no drama, just arrival. 2 days later, he found the flowers. Late-season asters, purple and white, cold ground, still alive. He stopped, picked them, brought them back to her. She looked at them, then at him. Well, he handed them over. She took them carefully. Thank you, quiet, real. That night they talked about what came after, the ranch, the land, the future. You'd stay, she asked. Our land, he said. She turned toward him, something settled in her expression. She kissed him, not hesitant, not unsure, certain. He kissed her back. The world didn't stop. The men they were hunting were still out there. Danger hadn't gone anywhere, but this was real too. They found the camp on the 9th day, hidden in a limestone draw, good position, protected. Horses tied, fire burning, men moving, one injured, arm in a sling, one missing. Look out, Terry said quietly. Emma nodded. I'll take the east side. I don't want you, Terry. She met his eyes. I'm here. He held it, then nodded. They split. Terry moved through the trees, slow, measured, silent, wind in his face. Good. 30 yards from camp, the lookout moved, fast, quiet, good. Lining up on Terry's back, the shot came from the east. Emma, the lookout, dropped, didn't get up. The camp exploded into motion. Terry came in low, fast. Sam Rickard turned, gun already in hand. Terry shot him twice. He fell. Carl Malone went for the rifle. A shot cracked past his ear. He froze, hands out. Don't. He didn't. Colt Varner stepped out, gun steady, eyes empty. You're the one from the saloon. The man you killed was my friend. Varner considered it. A lot of men are somebody's friend. Yeah, Terry fired. The shot hit high. Varner went back, slid down the rock, and stayed there. Done. C.J. Scott sat against the stone, still, watching. I'm not armed. I know. Emma stepped into camp, rifle steady. You all right? Terry asked. Fine. They brought 2 men back alive. The law took over, questions, paperwork, reward talk. Terry let it all pass. He had done what he said he would do. That was enough. They rode home in silence, nothing left to say. The oak trees had dropped half their leaves, brown ground, cold air, quiet creek. Terry stood at the grave, hat in his hands. Emma beside him, her hand found his, he held it. Lawrence Fielder, the stone said just enough. The rest didn't need saying. Wind moved through the trees, leaves lifted, then settled again. Terry had thought he'd feel something different, closure, relief. What he felt instead was quieter, finished. He had made a promise and kept it. Emma leaned into him. He would have liked this, she said. Which part? All of it. He thought about the fence, the road, the morning ride. Yeah, he said. His arm went around her shoulders. They stood there together under the oaks, while the light shifted and the day moved forward, and nothing more needed to be said. For more stories from the Old West, subscribe to Tumbleweed Tales and join us for the next story. The church doors were open. That was the first thing anyone noticed. Not wide, just enough. Evelyn Carter pushed through them with both hands. Her breath caught halfway out of her chest like it didn't know if it should stay or go. Her dress was wrong for running. Too long, too white, too final. Behind her, boots, heavy ones, measured. Not rushed, that was what made it worse. Evelyn, Aaron Strong didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to, it carried. She didn't turn, not again. She had already made that mistake once inside the church. Standing there, hands shaking, the preacher waiting, her father staring at the floor like the whole thing had already been decided. Come back, Strong said, calm, certain, like he was calling a stray dog. Evelyn gathered her skirts and ran. Main Street was alive with late afternoon movement, wagons rolling slow. Men talking in front of the general store. A pair of boys chasing each other through dust and sunlight. It all kept moving, like nothing was wrong, but heads turned. They always did. A woman running in a wedding dress that drew eyes. She cut across the street without looking. A wagon driver cursed and pulled his reins hard. A horse snorted. Wood creaked. She didn't slow. The blacksmith shop stood open at the far end of the road. Heat rolled out of it in waves. Metal on metal rang sharp and steady. She ran straight into it. Inside, dark, hot, alive with sparks. The man at the anvil looked up. Big, broad shoulders, arms blackened from work, hammer still in his hand. Evelyn didn't stop moving. "Please," she said. That was all she had time for. He looked past her, out the open doors, boots again, closer now. Aaron Strong stepped into the light outside, hat low, coat clean, face calm, like nothing had been interrupted. The blacksmith set his hammer down slow, wiped his hands once on a rag. "You got business here?" he asked. Strong's eyes flicked past him, just once, measuring. "A woman came this way," Strong said. "White dress." The blacksmith didn't turn, didn't even glance back. "No," he said, simple, flat. Strong stepped closer, boot heel on wood, then dirt, then wood again. "I don't like being lied to," Strong said. The blacksmith picked his hammer back up, not threatening, just holding it. "Then don't ask questions you don't want answered wrong." Silence. The kind that settles in the bones. Strong studied him, longer this time, like he was deciding whether this place was worth the trouble. Then he smiled, not friendly, not angry, just thin. "She won't get far," he said. He stepped back, turned, walked away like the whole thing was already finished. The sound of his boots faded. Only then did the blacksmith move. He turned. Walked toward the back of the shop. A narrow door, half hidden behind stacked iron and tools. He opened it. Evelyn stood inside, pressed against the far wall, hands shaking, eyes wide. "You breathe like that," he said quietly. "He'll hear you halfway to the river." She tried to steady herself, failed, then tried again. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go." He nodded once. "Name S. Olaf," she swallowed. "Evelyn." He studied her a moment, not unkind, just weighing. "That man," Olaf said, "he your husband." Her head snapped. "No," a pause. "Then he's got no claim worth honoring." The words settled heavy in the room. Evelyn closed her eyes just for a second. "He bought my father's debt," she said. "Calls it the same thing." Olaf didn't react right away. Then he nodded once, slow, figures. He stepped back toward the door. "You can stay here till dark," he said. "After that, we'll get you out of this town proper." She looked up at him, hope and fear tangled together. "He'll be watching," she said. Olaf gave a small shrug. "Men like that always are." He paused, then added, "But they don't see everything." Outside, the hammer rang again, like nothing had happened, but something had. Evelyn Carter had run, and for the first time since her father signed that paper, she wasn't standing still anymore. Dark came slowly that evening. The heat held on after the sun dropped, clinging to the blacksmith shop walls and the packed dirt outside like it had no intention of leaving. Evelyn sat in Olaf's little office with her hands folded so tight in her lap they ached. She had taken the veil off. The white dress still clung to her like a bad decision. Every so often she heard voices outside. A wagon, boots, the ring of metal, then quiet again. At last the door opened and Olaf stepped in carrying a brown parcel tied with cord. He set it on the desk. "Clothes," he said, "belonged to my sister before she married and moved west of here." Evelyn looked down at the package like it was some holy thing. "You don't know me," she said. Olaf leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. "I know enough." She untied the cord with stiff fingers. Inside was a plain traveling dress in dark blue, worn but clean, and a small brown bonnet. There was also a shawl, not fine, just practical. Her throat tightened. "Thank you." Olaf gave a shrug like thanks made him uncomfortable. "Stage leaves at dusk. Eastbound first, then north once it meets the rail line farther on. You won't be safe by morning if you're still in this town." She looked up. "I have almost no money." He reached into his shirt pocket and laid a few coins beside the parcel. "That's enough to get you started." Her eyes widened. "I can't take that." "You can," he said. "Because I'm giving it." That settled it. Olaf was a man who spoke in final words. She changed in silence. When she came out, the white dress was folded small and left on the chair. Olaf looked at it once, then at her. Better. They waited until the last of the daylight thinned from the sky. Then Olaf stepped out first, checked the road, and motioned her after him. They didn't walk down Main Street. They cut behind the livery, past stacked lumber, and crossed an alley where weeds pushed up through cracked earth. The town sounded different from behind. Less respectable, more honest. A piano from the saloon, laughter. A baby crying in some boarding room with the window open. A man coughing deep and hard. Evelyn kept close. Twice she thought she heard footsteps behind them, but each time it was only some townsman heading home or a boy running an errand. Still, she kept looking back. Olaf noticed. "If Strong sees you now," he said, "run toward people, not away from them." She nodded. "Would he truly drag me back in front of witnesses?" Olaf's jaw hardened. "Men like him count on others minding their own business." That answer stayed with her. The stage depot sat near the far edge of town, where travelers came and went without much ceremony. A lantern burned over the office window. A pair of tired horses stood in traces, heads low. The coach itself looked worn and dusty, as if it knew too much about desperate people. Olaf walked her to the steps. The driver glanced down from his seat. "She riding?" "She is," Olaf said. The driver spat to one side and nodded. "Then she best climb in." "I ain't waiting on anybody's tears." Evelyn turned to Olaf. There was more she wanted to say than fit in the moment. All that came out was, "You saved me." Olaf looked embarrassed by the truth of it. "No," he said, "I just declined to help the wrong man." Then, after a beat, "Stay ahead of him." She nodded once hard and climbed into the coach. Inside were 3 passengers already. An older couple sat together on one side, speaking softly to each other in the familiar way of people who had long ago stopped needing full sentences. Across from them sat a young woman with chestnut hair tucked neatly beneath a traveling hat. Beside her, near the far corner, was a narrow-faced man in a city coat with a sample case resting upright between his knees. A drummer, by the look of him. The kind who sold buttons, pins, combs, patent goods, and whatever else small towns would buy from a smooth voice. The young woman smiled first. "You just made it." Evelyn settled onto the bench and pulled the shawl close. Yes, that was all she trusted herself with. The coach jolted forward, wheels groaned, harness chains rattled. Outside, the town began to slide away. Evelyn looked out the window until the last lantern on the street disappeared. Only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding since the church. The young woman watched her kindly. "You look like you left in a hurry." Evelyn gave a faint, tired smile. "That plane?" "A little." The woman held out her hand. "My name is May Russell." Evelyn hesitated only a second before taking it. "Evelyn Carter." May's hand was warm and steady. She had a soft face but clear eyes, not foolish, just open. They rode in silence for a while. The older couple dozed. The drummer tipped his hat over his eyes, but not so low he could not listen. Evelyn noticed that. It made her careful. Still, it was May who spoke again. "I'm bound for Missoula, Montana." Evelyn turned. "That's a long way." "It is." May smiled, though it didn't hold. "I'm supposed to marry a rancher there." For a moment Evelyn thought she had heard wrong. "You've met him." May shook her head. "Only in letters." The coach rocked through a rut. One wheel struck hard and settled. Outside, night pressed against the glass. May looked down at her gloved hands. "He sounds decent," she said. "Writes plain. Talks about weather, cattle, and the river near his place. Said his mama taught him to be honest in a letter because lies look worse on paper." That brought the smallest trace of amusement to Evelyn's face. Maybe she was right. Maybe, May let out a breath, then her voice softened. But the closer I got to leaving home, the less brave I felt. Evelyn studied her. You don't want to go. May looked up, eyes shining though not yet crying. No, I thought I did. I thought I could make myself into that kind of woman. But when this stage reaches Liberty, Georgia, she paused. I'm getting off and going back to my mama. The words landed between them. Big words, life-turning words. Evelyn stared at her. Missoula. A rancher she had never met. A name waiting there for someone who would never arrive. The stage rolled on into the dark. And for the first time since she had run from the church, another road opened in Evelyn's mind. Not just escape. Something else. Something dangerous enough to look like hope. May tilted her head slightly. What is it? Evelyn looked at her for a long moment, then at the black window, then back again. I may have the wildest question you've ever heard, she said. The stage rolled steady through the night. Wood creaking, wheels grinding over packed earth, the kind of sound that settled into your bones if you listened too long. No one spoke for a while after Evelyn's words, not even the drummer, though she could feel him listening. May watched her carefully, not alarmed, just waiting. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. I don't mean harm, she said. I need you to understand that first. May nodded once. I believe you. Evelyn drew in a breath, held it. Then let it go slow. There's a man after me, she said. That much I gathered. He bought my father's debt, says I belong to him now. May's expression changed. Not shock, recognition. Like she had heard stories like that before. And you ran, May said. Yes. A pause. The stage rocked gently as it moved over a stretch of uneven road. I can't go back, Evelyn said. If he finds me, he won't ask twice. May's fingers tightened slightly around her gloves. I'm sorry. Evelyn shook her head. Don't be, just listen. She leaned closer. Close enough that the words wouldn't carry beyond the space between them. You're getting off at Liberty, Evelyn said. I am? You're going home. Yes. Evelyn held her gaze. And no one in Montana has ever seen your face. That was the moment, the one that changed the air between them. May didn't answer right away. She just looked at Evelyn, really looked this time. Measuring, the stage creaked. The horses snorted outside. The drummer shifted slightly in his seat, pretending to sleep. You're asking to take my place, May said quietly. Evelyn didn't flinch. Yes, silence. May leaned back just a little, not pulling away, just thinking. That's no small thing, she said. No, you'd be marrying a man you don't know. Evelyn gave a faint, tired smile. I was already about to do that. That landed. May looked down, then back up. He's a rancher, she said. Name S. Joe Manchester, right steady, not fancy. Just steady. Evelyn nodded, listening to every word like it mattered, because it did. He expects a woman from Cedar Hill, May continued. Then I'll be from somewhere else, Evelyn said quickly. Close enough to make sense, but not enough to raise questions. May studied her again, longer this time. You've thought about this, she said. Evelyn shook her head. No. I just started, but it fits. The stage rolled through a low dip. The lantern light inside flickered once. May glanced toward the drummer. He hadn't moved, but she lowered her voice anyway. If I do this, she said, you don't get to change your mind halfway there. I won't. You don't get to run again unless it's from something worse than what you're running from now. Evelyn held her gaze. I understand. Another pause. May let out a slow breath. Then listen carefully, she said. Evelyn leaned in. My name is May Russell. Evelyn nodded once. I'm from Cedar Hill, a beat. Then no, May said, correcting herself. Say Johnston City instead, smaller, fewer questions. Evelyn repeated it under her breath. Johnston City, May continued. My mama's name is Ellen Russell. My father passed 2 winters ago, fever. Evelyn listened like her life depended on it, because it did. I wrote Joe 3 letters, May said. Nothing fancy. Just told him I could cook, keep house, and I wasn't afraid of work. Evelyn almost smiled. That sounds right. May tilted her head. You'll have to make the rest your own." "I will." The stage rocked again. The sound of hooves steady and constant. May reached into her satchel, pulled out a folded bundle. Letters. Tied with ribbon, she held them out. Evelyn hesitated just for a second, then took them. The weight of them felt heavier than paper. "If he's a good man," May said softly, "don't lie to him longer than you have to." Evelyn looked up. There was something in that sentence, something deeper than advice. "I won't," she said. May nodded, then leaned back into her seat. "That's settled then." The words came easier than they should have. Outside, the night stretched long and open. After a while, May spoke again. Quieter now, almost to herself. "I reckon I wasn't ready to leave home after all." Evelyn looked at her. "You're sure?" May gave a small smile, the kind that held both relief and a little shame. "I am now." The stage rolled on, carrying one woman back to where she belonged, and another toward a life she had no right to and no intention of giving up. Across from them, beneath the brim of his hat, the drummer's eyes opened, just a sliver. Enough, he had heard, not everything, but enough. And men like him didn't forget useful things. Morning came gray and thin through the coach windows. Evelyn had not slept much. She had drifted in and out of it, waking every time the wheels struck a rut or the driver called to the horses. Each time she opened her eyes, she had to remember who she was supposed to be. Not Evelyn Carter, May Russell, from Johnston City, bound for Missoula. The words were starting to sit in her mouth more naturally than they should have. That troubled her some. The older couple got off at a crossroads not long after sunrise. They climbed down stiff and slow, thanked the driver, and disappeared into a waiting buckboard without ever asking another soul's business. That left only three inside the stage. Evelyn, the drummer, and the life she was pretending to deserve. May had left at liberty in the early dawn, hugging Evelyn once before stepping down. "Write your own ending," she had whispered. Then she was gone. Standing in the road with her satchel in hand, while the coach rolled on and took her name with it. Now the space beside Evelyn sat empty, too empty. She took out the letters Joe Manchester had written and unfolded the first one carefully. The paper was worn at the folds but neat. The writing was plain and square, like a man who cared more for saying a thing right than saying it pretty. He wrote of the weather first, then the spring calves. Then a creek on the north edge of his land that ran clear enough to see the stones beneath it. At the bottom he had added one line apart from the rest. "If you come here, you'll be treated fair. That I can promise before God." Evelyn read that line twice, then folded the paper again. "You taking comfort in ranch poetry," the voice came from the corner. The drummer had shifted closer sometime in the last hour, not enough to touch her, enough to remind her he could. Evelyn looked at him once, nothing more. "It's a letter," he smiled with half his mouth. "I know what it is. I got ears too, you know." She said nothing. That seemed to amuse him. He was not a handsome man. Too narrow in the shoulders, too slick in the hair, too pleased with himself by half. He wore a city coat gone shiny at the elbows and a bright necktie that looked chosen to be noticed. His sample case sat upright between his knees like a loyal dog. "I travel a great deal," he said. "You hear interesting things on the road." Evelyn kept her eyes on the window. "I imagine you do." He leaned one arm across the back of the seat, not touching her, crowding her all the same. "Funny thing about stories," he said. "If a man hears enough of one, he starts to see where the weak boards are." Now she looked at him, straight on. "What is it you want?" His smile widened a little, not because he liked the question, because he liked that she had asked it. "My stop is Oak Hills, Arkansas," he said. "Small hotel there, decent enough room, better company than the road offers." Evelyn stared at him, face still. Voice flat. "No," he chuckled softly like she was being playful. "I don't think you understand me." "I understand you exactly." His eyes dropped to the letters in her lap, then lifted again. "You're riding west on another woman's name," he said. You've got some fella waiting in Montana who don't know you from a fence post. If a body were to mention that in the wrong place, he let the sentence trail off. Didn't need to finish it. Men like him often believed suggestion made them clever. Evelyn folded the letters once more and tucked them into her satchel, carefully. Then she turned toward him fully. "Move your arm," she said. The smile thinned. "Now don't be proud. I'm offering you a kindness. One night and I forget what I heard." He reached then, not far, just enough to put his hand against the outside of her sleeve, as if he already had permission. That was his mistake. Evelyn drove her knee up hard, fast, clean, no warning. The sound he made was small and ugly. He folded forward over himself, breath gone, face white. At the same moment, she pulled the little derringer from beneath her shawl and pressed the barrel to the soft place just below his ear. The whole thing took less than 2 seconds. When the driver banged on the roof and shouted back, "What in hell's going on in there?" Evelyn answered without raising her voice, "Nothing that ain't finished." The drummer froze. His breath came in thin, pained pulls. One hand hovered useless in the air. She held the gun steady. "Listen close," she said. "You will sit back in that corner. You will keep your hands to yourself. And when you get off in Oak Hills, you will do it quiet." He swallowed, tried to laugh, couldn't. "You'd not shoot a man over." She pressed the barrel a little harder. "Try me." He believed her then. That was plain. Slowly, awkwardly, he dragged himself back into the corner seat, one hand between his knees, the other braced against the wall of the coach. He looked sick. Good. Evelyn lowered the derringer only when he had nowhere left to go. She didn't put it away. Not yet. The rest of the morning passed in silence. Heavy silence. Useful silence. When the stage reached Oak Hills near noon, the drummer got down without a word. He nearly stumbled doing it. The driver asked if he was drunk. The man muttered something about bad coffee and kept walking. He did not look back. Evelyn watched him go until the stage pulled away again. Only then did she slide the derringer back beneath her shawl. Only then did her hand begin to shake. She pressed it flat against her skirt until it stilled. Outside, the country kept opening. Fields gave way to rougher land. The air seemed drier already, wider somehow, as if the world ahead had more room in it than the one behind. She took Joe's letter back out and read the last line again. "If you come here, you'll be treated fair." For the first time, the thought came to her not as a hiding place, but as a possibility. The land changed before the town did. Evelyn noticed that first. The air felt different, drier, cleaner, like it had been strained through stone and pine before reaching her lungs. The trees stood taller here, spread wider, and the sky didn't feel crowded. The stage rolled along a narrow road that followed a river for a stretch. Sunlight caught the water in broken flashes, like something alive just beneath the surface. Evelyn leaned slightly toward the window, not enough to draw attention, just enough to see. For the first time since she had left that church, she wasn't looking behind her. Missoula came into view slow, not a grand town, not yet, a handful of buildings, wood smoke rising in thin lines. A few riders moving through the streets like they belonged to the place, and the place belonged to them. The stage pulled in near the depot just past midday, wheels grinding to a halt. Harness chains settling, the driver called out the stop like it mattered. Evelyn sat still for a moment, just one. Then she gathered her satchel and stepped down. The ground felt solid in a way that surprised her, not softer, not harder, just steady. There were people waiting, some for freight, some for letters, a few for passengers. She saw him before he saw her. He stood a little apart from the others, not pacing, not anxious, just waiting, hat low, work shirt clean but worn, hands resting easy at his sides. A man who didn't fidget with time, Joe Manchester. She knew it without being told. He stepped forward when the last of the passengers climbed down. His eyes moved over the faces once, twice. Then stopped on her. He didn't smile, not at first. He just looked like he was making sure. "You Miss Russell?" he asked. Evelyn felt the name settle over her like a coat she hadn't broken in yet. "Yes," she said. The word came easier than she expected. He nodded once. "I'm Joe Manchester." "I know." That brought the smallest shift at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. Something close. He reached for her satchel without asking, not taking, just offering to carry. She let him. "Long ride?" he asked as they started toward the edge of town. "Yes," he nodded. Didn't press it. That was the first thing she noticed. He didn't ask questions to fill space. They walked past the last of the buildings and onto a dirt track that led out toward open land. A horse waited there, tied loose to a rail, saddled, ready. "You ride?" he asked. "Yes." Another nod. He untied the horse and adjusted the stirrup for her without comment. She gathered her skirt and mounted clean. No hesitation. That earned her a glance. Not approval, just acknowledgement. He swung up behind her, close enough to guide, not close enough to crowd. They rode in silence for a while. The town fell away behind them. The land opened, wide, breathing. Cattle moved in the distance, slow and steady. A line of cottonwoods marked the bend of a creek. The wind carried the smell of grass and something else, something warm, alive. Evelyn let it in, all of it. "This yours?" she asked after a time. "Some of it," he said. "Rest of it belongs to folks who mind their own fences." She almost smiled at that. They rode another mile before he spoke again. "There's a 2-week understanding," he said. She nodded. "I know, no preacher, no vows, just time to see if it sits right. That seems fair." "It is," he paused. Then added, "If it don't sit right, you're free to leave." Evelyn turned her head slightly, not enough to see his face fully, just enough to hear the truth in his voice. "And if it does?" she asked. "Then we go into town proper and do it the right way. Simple, clean, no pressure." She let that settle. They crested a low rise, and then she saw it. The ranch, not large, not small. Built with purpose more than pride. A house set near a stand of trees, a barn off to one side, fence lines that made sense instead of showing off. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin and steady. A dog ran out to meet them, not barking, just moving fast, tail high, like it already knew something good had arrived. Evelyn felt something shift in her chest. Not fear, not exactly. Something quieter. They rode down toward the house. Joe slowed the horse near the gate, reached forward, opened it, closed it behind them without a word. The kind of motion that came from doing the same thing 100 times. They stopped near the porch. He slid down first, then held the reins while she dismounted. For a second, just a second, they stood facing each other. No town, no stage, no past chasing her, just this place, this man, this moment. "You hungry?" he asked. Evelyn looked past him, at the house, at the land stretching beyond it, at the dog circling her like she already belonged there, then back at him. "Yes," she said, and for the first time it wasn't just an answer, it was the truth. The first morning came quiet. Evelyn woke before the sun had fully cleared the ridge. For a moment she didn't move, didn't remember. Then she did. The room was small, clean. A washstand near the window, a chair with her folded dress laid across it, a quilt that smelled faintly of cedar and sun, not borrowed, not temporary, given. She sat up slowly, listened. Outside, movement, soft, measured. Joe was already awake. She dressed in the blue traveling dress Olaf had given her, brushed her hair back neat, tied it simple, no need for anything more. When she stepped outside, the air caught her off guard. Cool, sharp, alive. Joe stood near the fence line, checking something along the rails. The dog stayed close to him, watching everything like it mattered. He looked up when he heard her, gave a small nod. "Mornin', mornin'." No ceremony, no awkwardness. Just two people starting a day. "You sleep all right?" he asked. "Yes." He studied her a second, not prying, just making sure. "Coffee S on inside," he said. "Food'll be simple till you tell me otherwise." That landed different than she expected. "Otherwise?" she asked. "If you stay," he said, "this becomes your place too. No weight behind it, no push." Just a statement. She nodded once. Inside, the kitchen was plain but cared for, everything where it belonged, nothing wasted. She poured coffee, sat at the table, watched the light come through the window. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't bracing for something. That unsettled her more than fear ever had. The days began to take shape after that. Joe didn't hover, didn't watch her every move, didn't try to impress her. He worked. Fence lines, stock, repairs that didn't wait, and he let her find her place in it. She helped where she could. Cooking first, then small things outside, watering, gathering, learning the rhythm of the place. The animals came easy. The dog, half shepherd, half something else, stayed near her more each day. Not trained to it, just choosing. The horses watched her at first, then accepted her. Even the cattle seemed to settle when she moved among them. Slow, steady. Like they recognized something calm in her. On the third day, he took her into town. Missoula looked different when you arrived as someone who might stay. Less like a stop, more like a beginning. They walked side by side down the main stretch. No rush, no need. People nodded to Joe, he nodded back. No introductions made unless they were needed. At the church he stopped, looked at her once. "We go in," she hesitated, just for a breath, then nodded. Inside it was quiet, cool. They sat in the back, no preacher, no service, just stillness. Evelyn folded her hands, not out of habit. Out of something else. Joe didn't look at her, didn't speak. He just sat there. That meant more than anything he could have said. After they walked again. There was a small social gathering that evening. Music, not loud, just enough. Joe stood near the edge of it at first, like he wasn't sure it belonged to him. Evelyn looked at him. "You dance?" He gave a small huff of breath. "My mother made sure I could," she smiled. "Then don't waste the effort." He studied her a second, then held out his hand. She took it. The music was simple, the steps were easy, but he was steady, careful without being stiff. "You don't dance like a man who hates it," she said. "My mother said no son of hers was going to stomp around like a bull in a china shop." That brought a real smile out of her. They turned once, twice. The world narrowed down to movement, to timing, to trust. When the music ended, neither of them stepped away right off. They just stood there. Then he let go. On the fifth day, he packed a small basket, didn't say much about it. Just handed it to her once they were mounted. They rode out past the far fence line, to a rise that overlooked the creek he had written about. The water ran clear, just like he said. They sat there in the grass, a blanket between them, food simple, bread, cheese, cold meat, no talking at first. "Then this place," she said quietly, "it feels different." He glanced at her. How? She searched for it, didn't rush it, like it doesn't ask anything of you that you can't give. He nodded once. "That's the idea." A breeze moved through the grass, soft, endless. Evelyn looked out over the land, then back at him. There was something there now, not forced, not imagined, earned, and it scared her, because for the first time she wasn't thinking about leaving. The morning before the wedding came clear, too clear. Evelyn stood at the edge of the porch with her hands resting lightly on the rail. The air was still. The kind of still that made every small sound carry farther than it should. Joe was in the yard, working a length of rope through his hands, checking it for wear. Same as any other morning. But it was not for her. The truth had been sitting in her chest for days now. Quiet, heavy, waiting, she couldn't carry it any farther. "Joe," he looked up, not quick, not slow. Just when the sound of his name reached him, she stepped down off the porch, walked toward him, each step steady, even if she didn't feel it. "I need to tell you something," she said. He watched her. Gave a small nod. "All right." No tension, no suspicion. That made it harder. She stopped a few feet from him, close enough that she didn't have to raise her voice. "My name is May Russell." The words hung there, clean, final. Joe didn't move, didn't speak. She went on, because stopping now would be worse. "It's Evelyn Carter." A breath. "I ran from a man named Aaron Strong. He bought my father's debt and decided that gave him the right to marry me. Joe's jaw shifted once. Nothing more. I left the church before the vows, she said. Got out on the stage that same night. She held his eyes, didn't look away. I met the real May on that stage. She was heading to you, but she wasn't ready to leave home. Not really. A pause. She got off in Georgia. The wind moved faint through the grass. I took her place, Evelyn said. Silence again. Then Joe looked down at the rope in his hands. Turned it once, twice, not avoiding her, just taking it in. You planning to leave? He asked. The question caught her off guard. No, he nodded once. You planning to lie about it after today? No, another nod. He looked up then, met her eyes again. Then I don't see much difference. Evelyn blinked. You do, he shrugged slightly. Name don't change what I've seen these last days. She searched his face. You're not angry, he thought about that, not quick. No, he said. Then after a beat, I don't care if your name's George. That pulled a breath out of her she didn't know she'd been holding. I care about what you do, he said. And you've done right by this place. He paused, and by me. The weight lifted, not all at once, but enough. Evelyn nodded once, hard. Then I want to stay, she said. Joe held her gaze. Then stay. Simple as that. For a moment everything felt settled. Then the dog barked, sharp, not playful, not curious. Warning, both of them turned. A rider stood just beyond the gate, hat low. Horse still, watching. Evelyn felt the ground drop out from under her. Aaron strong. He hadn't changed, still clean, still calm, still certain. Joe didn't ask, didn't need to. That him? He said. Yes. Joe handed the rope off to the fence post, started toward the gate. Evelyn caught his arm. Joe, he looked at her. You stay here, he said, not harsh, not soft, final. He walked to the gate, opened it, stepped through, closed it behind him. Aaron Strong dismounted slow, like he had all the time in the world. I've come a long way, Strong said. Joe stopped a few paces from him. You can turn around and go back the same way, Strong smiled thin. That woman belongs to me. Joe didn't answer right away. Then, no, that was it. Strong stepped forward, just one step. You don't understand the arrangement, Joe hit him. No warning, no wind-up. Just a clean, hard strike that dropped Strong to the ground like a cut rope. The horse shifted, snorted, stepped back. Strong tried to rise. Joe didn't let him. Another hit. Short, controlled, not rage, correction. Strong curled inward, breath gone, face in the dirt. Joe stepped back, let him stay there. Evelyn stood frozen near the porch, heart hammering. Strong coughed once, tried to speak, failed. The sound of hooves came from the road. A second rider. Sheriff Dylan Matthews. He pulled up slow, taking in the scene with one long look. Well, the sheriff said, that answers part of my mourning. He dismounted, walked over, looked down at Strong. Then at Joe, then at Evelyn. Anybody want to tell me what this is about? Evelyn stepped forward. I will. And she did everything, the debt, the forced marriage, the chase, the stage, the name. She didn't rush it, didn't soften it, just told it straight. The sheriff listened, didn't interrupt, didn't hurry her. When she finished, he nodded once, then looked down at Strong again. Get up. Strong didn't move fast, but he moved. The sheriff took his arm, firm. I'm placing you under arrest, he said. For what? Strong managed. For enough to start, the sheriff said. And more once I'm done looking into it. Strong's eyes flicked toward Evelyn, still calculating, even now. The sheriff tightened his grip. Don't, he said quietly. That ended it. He led Strong to his horse, secured him, mounted up. Before leaving, he looked once more at Joe and Evelyn. You did right telling it, he said. Then he turned and rode out. The dust settled slow behind them. Evelyn stood still. Joe walked back through the gate, closed it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, you still planning on tomorrow? He asked. Evelyn looked at him, at the man who had not asked her to be anything but honest. Yes, she said, and this time there was no hesitation at all. The morning came soft, not bright, not loud, just steady. Evelyn stood in the small room with her hands resting against the edge of the washstand. The dress was simple, not the one she had run from. Not borrowed, not forced. This one was hers. She adjusted the sleeves once. Didn't need to, did it anyway. Outside she could hear movement, boots on dirt, a horse shifting. The low murmur of a couple of voices that didn't need to carry. No crowd, no spectacle, just the people who belonged there. She stepped out onto the porch. Joe stood near the fence, hat in his hands. Not moving much, waiting. When he saw her, he didn't say anything right off, just looked, same as the first time but different now. "Ready?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. Yes. They walked side by side toward the small church in town. No rush. No weight pressing down on them. The air felt clear. The sky wide. Missoula looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. It felt like something she had stepped into instead of passed through. The church door stood open. This time she walked through it without hesitation. The preacher stood at the front. A couple of townsfolk sat quietly along the benches. The sheriff leaned back near the wall, hat tipped low, saying nothing to anyone. Joe took his place beside her. No grand moment, no music. Just stillness. The preacher spoke the words plain, not stretched, not dressed up. Evelyn listened, not to the sound of it but to the meaning. When the time came, she answered steady. "I do." Joe followed, same tone, same weight, no more needed. The preacher nodded once. "That's enough of that," he said, and just like that it was done. Outside the light felt different. Evelyn stepped down off the church porch and paused, just for a second. Not because she had to, because she wanted to feel it. Joe came to stand beside her. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. A wagon passed slow down the street. A man tipped his hat. The sheriff gave a small nod from across the way. Life kept moving, just including them now. They rode back to the ranch the same way they had come days before. But this time, there was no distance between what was real and what she was pretending to be. It was all the same thing now. The gate opened, closed. The dog met them halfway, tail high, circling once before settling in close. Evelyn laughed, not loud, just enough. Inside, the house felt warmer, not changed, claimed. Days turned into weeks the way they were meant to, without announcement, without effort. Evelyn found her rhythm, cooking, working, walking the fence lines with Joe when the day allowed it. The land didn't test her, it accepted her. Joe stayed the same man, quiet, steady, but there were small things, a hand at her back when she stepped over uneven ground. A glance that lasted a second longer than it used to. A chair pulled out before she reached for it. Nothing spoken, everything understood. One afternoon the sheriff rode out, didn't stay long. Just tied off his horse, stepped up onto the porch and spoke plain. "Strong's headed to prison," he said. "Charges stuck, more than enough of 'em." Evelyn felt something settle inside her. Not relief, something deeper, final. She nodded. "Thank you." The sheriff tipped his hat once. "Wasn't me," he said. "Was what he did." Then he rode off the same way he came. No ceremony, no need. Late in the season the dog had puppies. 5 of them, small, unsteady, full of noise and life. Evelyn sat in the grass watching them tumble over each other while Joe leaned against the fence nearby. "They think they own the place already," she said. Joe glanced over. "Reckon they do," she smiled. The sun dipped low, casting everything in that warm, quiet gold that didn't last long enough. Evelyn looked out over the land, the fence lines, the trees, the slow movement of cattle in the distance, then back at Joe. There was no question left in her, no running, no pretending, just this. And it was enough, more than enough. She reached for his hand. He didn't look down, just held it, like it had always been there. For more stories from the Old West, subscribe to Tumbleweed Tales and join us for the next story. They buried him 2 years ago. Johnny Dawson helped dig the grave. He had lowered the pine box into the Wyoming earth with his own hands. He had shoveled the dirt. He had stood in the wind while the preacher spoke. He had watched the widow cry. So when the man rode back into Rock Springs on a cold October evening, there was no question of who he was. The question was how. The sun was sinking behind the distant buttes, spreading long red bands across the sky. Rock Springs lay in the soft amber light that came just before dusk. Lamps were beginning to glow in windows. Wagons creaked homeward. Voices drifted from Sarah O'Malley's cafe. Johnny Dawson stood in the street outside the livery, tightening the cinch on his horse. He felt it before he saw it, a small stillness, a strange pause. He looked west. A lone rider was coming down the road, nothing unusual in that. Men came and went every day. But this rider moved with a peculiar steadiness. The horse was tired, the man was not. He sat too straight, too still, as if he had been placed in the saddle and forgotten there. Johnny narrowed his eyes. The rider came closer. The brim of his hat cast a shadow over his face. His coat was familiar, brown wool, a tear at the left shoulder. Johnny remembered that tear. He had seen it the day they buried him. The horse slowed as it entered town. The rider lifted his head. The last light touched his face. Johnny felt every muscle in his body lock. His mouth went dry. He took one step backward, then another. Robert Scott was crossing the street from the Mercantile. Johnny did not answer. He could not. The rider reined in near the hitch rail. He looked directly at Johnny. His face was pale, not corpse pale, not sick pale, just as if the sun had not touched him in a very long time. He tipped his hat. "Evening, Johnny." The voice was exactly the same. Robert stopped beside him. "What is it?" Johnny's throat tightened. He never took his eyes off the rider. "That man's buried." For a moment nobody moved. Rock Springs did not fall silent all at once. It happened in pieces. A hammer stopped at the blacksmith shop. A wagon wheel creaked once, then stilled. A woman on the boardwalk turned with a parcel in her hands and forgot to keep walking. At Sarah O'Malley's cafe, the front door opened, and warm lamplight spilled into the street. Sarah stepped out. She saw Johnny first, then Robert, then the rider. Her expression changed, but she did not speak. The man sat his horse at the hitch rail like he had returned from an ordinary ride. His hands rested loose on the reins. His hat was worn low. His boots were dusty. There was trail dirt on his coat, but not enough for a long journey. That bothered Johnny more than blood would have. A bleeding man made sense. A sick man made sense. This man looked as if he had simply misplaced 2 years and found his way back after supper. Johnny took one step toward him. Robert caught his arm. "Wait." Johnny looked down at Robert's hand. Robert let go. The rider watched them both. There was no fear in him, no confusion, no relief. That was wrong too. A man coming back from the dead ought to carry something in his face. Terror, wonder, madness, grief, something. This man carried nothing. Johnny walked forward. His boots sounded too loud in the dirt street. "What's your name?" The rider blinked once. "Caleb Mercer." A woman behind Sarah gasped. Johnny felt the name land in the street like a dropped stone. Caleb Mercer, ranch hand, drifter, good with horses, poor with cards, killed in a creek wash 2 years ago when his horse came down on him in a storm. Johnny had found him. Johnny had brought him home. Johnny had helped bury him. The rider looked past Johnny toward the cafe. "Is Miss O'Malley still serving coffee?" Sarah's face tightened. "I am," Caleb nodded. "Good." Johnny stopped 3 paces from the horse, close enough to see the man's eyes. They were Caleb's eyes, gray with a brown ring near the center. Johnny remembered those eyes staring at nothing in the bottom of a wagon bed. He remembered closing them. His hand drifted near his pistol without touching it. "Where have you been?" Caleb looked at him. A small line formed between his brows. "Riding." "From where?" Caleb seemed to think on it. Then he said, "West." "That ain't an answer. It's the one I've got." Robert moved up beside Johnny. "You remember me?" Caleb looked at him. "Robert Scott." "You gave me work once after I lost my pay at cards." Robert's jaw tightened. That was 3 years ago. I paid you back. You did. Caleb turned his head slightly. And Johnny Dawson told me I was a fool for betting against a man with clean fingernails. Johnny's stomach turned cold. He had said that. Nobody else had been there. Just him, Caleb, and a crooked dealer from Green River. Johnny stepped closer. What else do you remember? Caleb's eyes returned to him. I remember you pulling me out of the wash. The street seemed to lean inward. Johnny did not breathe. Caleb continued, calm as a man discussing weather. Rain was hard. Horse was screaming. My leg was under him. You had blood on your sleeve, not yours. Mine. Johnny stared at him. Caleb looked down at Johnny's left hand. You kept telling me not to sleep. Johnny swallowed. You died before we reached town. Caleb's face did not change. No. Yes. No, Johnny. The words were quiet, not angry. That made them worse. Caleb swung down from the saddle. The horse flinched when his boots touched the ground. It jerked its head hard, eyes rolling white. Caleb did not notice, or pretended not to. Johnny noticed. So did Sarah. She took one slow step down from the cafe porch. Caleb stood in the street, straight-backed and calm. He was no taller than Johnny remembered, no thinner, no older. 2 years had passed over Rock Springs. They had not passed over him. Johnny looked at his hands. No rot, no scars, no sign of the grave, only dirt beneath his nails. Fresh dirt. J.T. Johnston came from the far side of the street, broad shoulders filling the space between two wagons. He stopped when he saw Caleb. His face went flat. Mercer, Caleb turned. J.T. said nothing. For once that big man had no words. Caleb looked around at the gathered faces. A faint impatience crossed his expression. Why is everybody looking at me like that? No one answered. Johnny did. Because we put you in a box. Caleb looked back at him. A box. A pine box. The wind moved through the street. A loose shutter tapped once against a wall. Johnny's voice dropped. We buried you on the hill north of town. For the first time, something shifted in Caleb's face. Not fear, not belief, a small irritation, as if Johnny had insulted him. That's not funny. No, Johnny stepped closer. It ain't. Caleb's gaze held his. Then Caleb leaned in slightly and his voice lowered. You put me in the ground. Johnny did not answer. Because there was nothing to say. Caleb looked at the town, at Sarah, at Robert, at J.T., then back to Johnny. His eyes were steady, too steady. You put me in the ground, he said again. And this time, it sounded less like a question, more like something inside him had just heard the words spoken aloud, and was beginning to wake up. Night settled over Rock Springs with a hard, windless stillness. The kind of night where every sound seemed too clear. A horse shifting in a stall, the distant bark of a dog, the creak of wood cooling after sunset. Johnny Dawson sat on his horse beside Robert Scott and J.T. Johnston as they rode north out of town. No one had suggested the trip. It had simply become the only thing left to do. Caleb Mercer was in Sarah's cafe, drinking coffee. Sarah had insisted he stay where people could see him. Caleb had agreed without argument. That bothered Johnny almost as much as the man himself. A liar usually protested. A madman raved. A frightened man asked questions. Caleb had done none of those things. He had sat at a corner table and wrapped both hands around a coffee cup as if he had just ridden in from Green River. As if 2 years had not passed. As if Johnny had not watched dirt strike the lid of his coffin. The moon was only a thin sliver. Their lantern cast a weak yellow circle that moved across the sagebrush and scattered stones. The cemetery sat on a low rise north of town, nothing more than a fenced patch of Wyoming earth with weathered markers leaning in the wind. Johnny dismounted before the others. He knew the grave without looking for the name. He had stood there too many times. Caleb Mercer, a simple wooden cross. The lettering was faded but still visible. Robert held up the lantern. J.T. stood with his arms folded, broad shoulders blotting out part of the night. For several seconds, no one spoke. Johnny stared at the grave. The mound was intact. The earth had settled naturally over time. Dry grass grew along the edges. There were no signs of fresh digging, no loose dirt, no broken ground, nothing. JT exhaled. Well, Robert crouched and ran his fingers over the soil. Ground's hard. Johnny looked at the cross. I put him here. Robert stood. We know. Johnny shook his head. No, Robert. I mean, I put him here. His voice dropped. I lifted the coffin, I nailed the lid shut, I shoveled the dirt. The words came back with the force of memory: rainwater, mud, the smell of wet pine. Caleb Mercer lying in the wagon bed with his chest crushed and his face gray. The preacher's hat held against the wind. Johnny's own hands blistered from the shovel handle. He had not imagined any of it. JT moved closer to the grave. You reckon somebody dug him up? Robert glanced at the settled ground. If they did, they put every blade of grass back where they found it. JT grunted. That's not possible. Johnny looked down at the mound. Nothing about it was disturbed. Nothing about it suggested a coffin had ever left the earth. Yet Caleb Mercer was sitting in Sarah's cafe drinking coffee. The two facts could not exist together, and still they did. Robert held the lantern lower. His voice was quiet. There's one way to know. JT turned sharply. No, Robert met his eyes. If we open it, we know what's in there. JT's jaw tightened. And if it's him? Robert did not answer, because none of them knew what that would mean. Johnny kept his eyes on the grave. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to put a shovel into the dirt and force the truth into the open. But another part of him resisted. The part that had fought through the war. The part that knew some truths did not settle anything. They only gave a man a new kind of fear. After a long moment, Johnny said, "Not tonight." JT released a breath. Robert nodded. Johnny knelt by the grave. He rested one hand on the dry earth. Cold, solid, undisturbed, exactly as it should be. And that was the worst part. If the grave had been open, he could have understood it. If the coffin had been empty, he could have formed a theory. But the grave looked untouched, as if Caleb Mercer had never left it. Johnny stood. The lantern light caught the strain in his face. Robert asked the question they were all thinking. If he's in there, no one finished the sentence, because the answer stood in town, drinking Sarah's coffee. JT looked back toward the distant lights of Rock Springs. What do we do now? Johnny stared at the cross one final moment. The wind stirred the grass around the mound. Nothing else moved. He turned away. We go back. They mounted and rode toward town. The lights of Rock Springs flickered below them, warm, ordinary, as if the world still made sense. Halfway down the hill, Johnny looked over his shoulder. The grave lay pale in the moonlight, unbroken, silent, exactly as they had left it 2 years before. Johnny faced forward again. His voice was almost swallowed by the wind. We buried him. He tightened his grip on the reins. I know we did. Sarah O'Malley's cafe had never felt smaller. The room was exactly as it always was. Oil lamps cast warm light across polished tables. The smell of coffee and fresh bread lingered in the air. A pot simmered quietly on the stove. Mae Johnston moved behind the counter, drying cups with steady hands. Nothing in the room had changed, and yet every person inside felt it. The world had shifted. Just a little, enough to throw everything out of balance. Caleb Mercer sat alone at the corner table nearest the front window, the same table he used to favor when he came in from the range. His hat rested on the chair beside him. His coat was folded neatly over the back. A half-empty coffee cup sat before him. He held it in both hands as if savoring its warmth. He looked like a man who had returned after a long ride, nothing more. Sarah carried over a bowl of stew. Caleb looked up and gave her the same shy half-smile she remembered from years ago. "Thank you, Miss O'Malley." Sarah set the bowl down. "You're welcome." Her voice was calm. Only Johnny, standing near the stove, noticed the slight tightness in her jaw. Caleb picked up the spoon and tasted the stew. He closed his eyes for a brief moment. "That's good." Sarah folded her arms. "You remember my cooking?" He nodded. "Best in Wyoming territory." The words were familiar. Caleb had said them dozens of times. That should have been comforting. It was not. The cafe was nearly empty. Robert sat at one table with Anna. JT leaned against the wall near the door, arms crossed over his broad chest. May remained behind the counter, unusually quiet. Meng-Chin O'Malley sat in her usual chair near the stove, her hands folded in her lap. She had not spoken since Caleb entered. She simply watched and listened. Johnny stood nearest to Caleb. Not by accident. He wanted to hear every word. He wanted to see every flicker of expression. He wanted some proof that this man was not who he appeared to be. But Caleb ate slowly and answered questions as if this were any ordinary evening. Robert asked, "What's the last thing you remember?" Caleb set down his spoon. He thought for several moments. "Rain." His voice was even. "Hard rain." Johnny's chest tightened. Caleb looked down at his hands. "My horse went down." He touched his side absently. "There was pain." He glanced at Johnny. "You were there." Johnny said nothing. Caleb frowned slightly. After that, he paused. The room waited. Caleb shook his head. "Nothing." "Nothing?" Sarah asked. He looked at her. "I remember the rain." I remember Johnny's voice. His brow furrowed. "Then I woke up." "Where?" Robert asked. Caleb lifted one shoulder. "In the hills." "What hills?" "I don't know." His answer held no uncertainty, only simple fact. "I woke up lying on the ground. It was morning. My horse was grazing nearby." JT shifted his weight. "And you just rode back here?" Caleb nodded. "Yes." "After 2 years?" Caleb turned toward him. "What do you mean?" No one spoke. The question hung in the room. Caleb looked from face to face. His expression did not change, but a faint confusion entered his eyes. Johnny stepped forward. "You disappeared 2 years ago, Caleb." Caleb stared at him. "That's impossible." Johnny's voice remained level. "We buried you." Caleb shook his head. "No." Johnny said nothing. Caleb looked to Sarah as if expecting her to contradict him. She did not. He looked to Robert, then JT, then Meng-Chin. None of them spoke. Caleb leaned back slowly in his chair. His eyes narrowed. For the first time, his calm seemed forced. "That can't be right," Sarah asked quietly. "What year do you think this is?" Caleb answered at once. 1873. The room went still. Sarah lowered her eyes. Robert exhaled softly. Johnny felt a coldness settle in his stomach. 2 years, gone. To Caleb Mercer they had never happened. Caleb looked around the cafe again. His face was composed. But Johnny could see a subtle strain in him now, a slight tightening around the mouth, the eyes focusing a fraction too hard, a man trying to fit the world back together, and failing. Caleb looked at Sarah. "Has something happened to me?" No one answered immediately. At last Sarah pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. Her voice was gentle. "Yes." Caleb absorbed that. He looked down at his coffee cup. His hands were perfectly steady. That was wrong. A man hearing such words should tremble, should shout, should deny them. Caleb simply sat, quiet, thoughtful, as if he were trying to remember a detail from an old conversation. Johnny studied him. Everything was present. The voice, the memories, the face, the habits, and yet something vital was absent. He could not name it, only feel it, like standing in a familiar room after someone had removed one important piece. You knew it belonged there. You knew it was missing. But the emptiness itself was hard to define. Meng-Chin spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft, but every word carried. "Some journeys leave part of us behind." Caleb turned to her. She met his eyes calmly. He held her gaze for a moment, then he looked away. Johnny saw it then, a tiny hesitation, a flicker of something almost like fear. It was the first genuine emotion Caleb had shown, and it was gone as quickly as it came. The hour grew late. The lamps burned lower. Outside, the town settled into uneasy silence. Caleb finished his meal. He thanked Sarah. He sat with his hands folded on the table, waiting. Johnny stood near the stove, unable to look away. Sarah moved beside him. Her voice was little more than a whisper. "What do you think?" Johnny kept his eyes on Caleb. After a long moment he answered, "He remembers everything." Sarah nodded. "Almost." Johnny's jaw tightened. He watched Caleb Mercer sitting alone beneath the warm glow of the oil lamp. The face was right, the voice was right, the memories were right. But something was absent, something essential. Johnny spoke so quietly only Sarah heard him. "Something's missing in him." By morning, Rock Springs had the look of a town pretending nothing had happened. Wagons rattled down the street. The blacksmith's hammer rang against iron. Children chased one another past the mercantile. Sarah's front windows glowed with early sunlight and the smell of biscuits. Life went on. It always did. But beneath the ordinary sounds, a nervous current moved through the town. People spoke in lowered voices. They glanced toward the cafe. And when Caleb Mercer stepped onto the boardwalk after breakfast, conversation stopped as cleanly as if a door had been closed. Caleb seemed unaware of it, or else he chose not to notice. He stood outside Sarah's cafe with his hat in his hands, letting the cool morning sun warm his face. For a moment he looked like any other man who had come through a hard season and was grateful to be alive. Johnny watched him from across the street. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Caleb standing beside his own grave, the same face, the same voice, the same impossible calm. Caleb looked up and saw Johnny. He gave a small nod. Johnny returned it. Neither man crossed the street. The first sign came from a dog. Old Sam Tucker's hound was half-blind and lazy, a yellow mutt that usually slept beneath the general store porch. Caleb walked past. The dog lifted its head. For one heartbeat it stared. Then it scrambled backward with a startled yelp, tail tucked tight against its belly. It retreated beneath the porch and began to whine. Several townspeople turned to look. Caleb stopped. He frowned. "Never did like me much." No one laughed. Johnny watched the dog trembling in the shadows. Animals knew things men ignored. He had learned that long ago. The second sign was harder to explain. Near midday, Caleb stepped into the livery to check on his horse. The gelding was standing quietly in its stall. The moment Caleb entered, the animal's ears flattened. Its eyes widened. It jerked against the halter and began to rear. Dust exploded into the air. The horse struck the wall with both front hooves. Caleb froze. "Easy." His voice was calm. The horse screamed. Not a frightened whinny. A high, desperate sound Johnny had heard only from wounded animals. Johnny and the stable boy rushed inside. By the time they reached the stall, Caleb had backed away. The horse stood shaking, foam around its mouth, every muscle rigid. Johnny turned to Caleb. "Did you hurt him?" Caleb stared at the horse. "No," Johnny believed him. That was the troubling part. That afternoon, Caleb helped May carry a sack of flour from the supply wagon. He moved with the same easy strength Johnny remembered. He spoke politely. He smiled when May thanked him. Yet the young woman hurried back inside and closed the door harder than necessary. Sarah found her standing behind the counter, hands pressed flat against the wood. "You all right?" May nodded, though she did not look convinced. "He's the same." Sarah waited. May swallowed. But when he looked at me, she shook her head. "I felt like somebody else was standing behind him." Sarah said nothing, because she understood exactly what the girl meant. The day wore on. No one saw Caleb do anything threatening. No harsh words. No strange acts. No temper. If anything, he was quieter than he had once been, more thoughtful, more distant. And yet wherever he went, a subtle stillness followed. Birdsong seemed to fade. Dogs tucked their tails. Conversation stumbled. Johnny noticed another thing. Caleb cast a shadow like any other man. But once, when clouds moved over the street, Johnny had the unmistakable impression that Caleb's shadow lingered a fraction too long after he stepped forward. Johnny blinked. It was normal again. He told himself he was tired, nothing more. Still, the image stayed with him. That evening, Sarah served supper to a smaller crowd than usual. Most people preferred to remain home. Caleb sat once again at his corner table. Meng Chin watched him from her chair by the stove. She had spent the day in silence, sewing and observing. Johnny took his usual place near the front window. Robert and Anna sat nearby. The lamps cast soft gold light over the room. Outside, darkness gathered beyond the glass. Caleb looked around at the subdued atmosphere. "I've made everyone uneasy." Sarah poured coffee into his cup. "You came back after being buried." Caleb considered that. "Yes." He spoke as though the sentence still had not fully settled in his mind. Meng Chin set aside her sewing. The room grew quieter. She studied Caleb for a long moment. Then she said in her gentle voice, "There are places a soul may pass through and return unchanged." Caleb looked at her. She continued, "And there are places that do not let a man travel alone." No one moved. Caleb held her gaze. For the first time that day his expression faltered, only slightly, but enough. He looked away. His hands tightened around the coffee cup. Johnny felt a cold line move down his spine. Sarah stood very still. Robert shifted in his chair. JT, near the door, uncrossed his arms. Meng Chin spoke one final sentence, quietly, certainly. He did not come back alone. No one answered. The words hung in the warm cafe like smoke. Caleb Mercer stared into his coffee. The lamp above his table flickered once, then steadied. Outside, the night wind moved through rock springs. Inside, every eye remained fixed on the man they had buried, and whatever might be sitting beside him. Johnny Dawson found Caleb Mercer alone behind the livery just after midnight. The town had gone quiet. Sarah's lamps were out. The boardwalk stood empty. A thin moon hung above the rooftops, washing the street in silver and shadow. Caleb sat on an overturned water trough, his elbows resting on his knees. He was staring up at the stars. For a moment Johnny saw the man he remembered. The Caleb Mercer who used to sleep under wagons, laugh too loudly at bad jokes, and lose every dollar he earned at cards. Then Caleb turned. And the feeling vanished. Not because his face was wrong, because it was too calm. A man told he had been dead for 2 years should not look this composed. Johnny stepped into the moonlight. "Can't sleep," Caleb gave a faint smile. "I don't seem to need much of it." Johnny leaned against the fence opposite him. For a while neither man spoke. The horses in the stable shifted uneasily. One snorted and stamped. Caleb heard it and lowered his eyes. "They still don't like me." Johnny folded his arms. "No." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "Do you?" Johnny considered the question. "I don't know what you are." Caleb accepted that with a small nod. "Fair enough." The night air carried the smell of sage and distant coal smoke. Johnny kept his eyes on Caleb. "When you disappeared, we searched for 3 days." Caleb listened. "We found you in the wash. Horse had rolled on you." Johnny paused. "You were gone." Caleb stared at the ground. "I remember the rain." Johnny nodded. "I brought you back to town." He swallowed. "Sarah cleaned you up. Robert built." Caleb was silent for so long Johnny wondered if he had stopped listening. Finally Caleb said, "I don't remember any of that." "You wouldn't." Caleb looked up. Johnny held his gaze. "You died, Caleb." The words settled between them. This time Caleb did not argue. He looked away toward the dark street. His hands tightened slowly. "I keep trying to tell myself you're mistaken." Johnny said nothing. Caleb's voice dropped. "But everybody I knew looks at me like they've seen a ghost." He let out a humorless breath. "Maybe they have." Caleb rubbed his hands together as if trying to warm them. Johnny noticed they trembled slightly for the first time. "Tell me exactly what you remember." Caleb nodded. He stared into the darkness. "I was riding north of Bitter Creek. The storm came on fast." He closed his eyes. "My horse slipped." His breathing grew shallower. "I felt the weight come down." He touched his ribs. I couldn't breathe. Johnny listened without interrupting. Caleb's voice became distant. You were there. Yes. I heard you shouting. Caleb frowned. You kept saying my name. Johnny looked down. I did. Caleb opened his eyes. There was thunder. He hesitated. Then everything got very quiet. Johnny felt a chill. How quiet? Caleb searched for words. Not like silence. He shook his head. More like the world had stepped away. He stared at the dirt. I thought I was alone. Johnny waited. Caleb's voice softened. I started walking. Johnny's jaw tightened. Where? I don't know. Caleb looked frustrated now. There was no trail, no sky, no ground I could see, just enough light to know I wasn't in darkness. He swallowed. I kept hearing something behind me. Johnny felt his skin tighten. What? Caleb's eyes lifted to his. I never turned around. The horses shifted in the stable again. One struck the wall with a hoof. Caleb flinched. Johnny remained very still. Caleb continued. I walked for what felt like days, maybe minutes. I don't know. He drew a shaky breath. Then I saw morning, real morning, sunlight on the hills. My horse was standing nearby. Johnny asked quietly, and that was all. Caleb nodded. I mounted up and rode home. He looked at Johnny, his eyes suddenly uncertain. I thought I'd been gone one night. Johnny held his gaze. You were gone 2 years. Caleb stood and began pacing. The calm he had carried since arriving was beginning to crack. That's not possible. Johnny said nothing. Caleb stopped and faced him. If I died, he struggled over the word. If I died, then what came back? Johnny wished he had an answer. Instead, he said the only truthful thing. I think you came back. Caleb looked unconvinced. Then why does everyone feel like they're standing next to a storm? Johnny glanced toward the stable. The horses were restless again. Because maybe something found you on that road. Caleb's face tightened. The words clearly struck something he had been trying not to think about. He stared into the darkness beyond the fence. I kept hearing footsteps. Johnny said nothing. Caleb whispered, I thought if I turned around I'd see what was following me. He looked at Johnny. I was afraid that if I stopped walking, his voice broke for the first time, it would catch up. The two men stood in the moonlight, neither speaking. At length Caleb sank back onto the trough. He looked suddenly exhausted, more human than he had since his return. Johnny stepped closer. Why didn't you tell us this before? Caleb rubbed his face. Because it sounds like madness. Johnny considered him. Then he said quietly, maybe. Caleb lowered his hands. Johnny continued. Or maybe it's the truth. Caleb looked at him. For the first time since riding into town, genuine fear stood plainly in his eyes. Johnny asked the question that mattered. After you woke up, did you ever look behind you? Caleb stared at him. Slowly he shook his head. No. He looked toward the dark end of the alley. His voice was barely audible. I was afraid it might still be there. The wind moved softly through the buildings. Somewhere in the town, a loose shutter tapped. Caleb sat motionless, staring into the night. Johnny stood beside him, hand resting near his pistol, though he did not know what good it would do. After a long silence, Caleb spoke. The words were little more than a whisper. I walked back. The next day dawned gray and cold. Low clouds hung over Rock Springs like a lid. The wind had dropped. Even the usual sounds of the town seemed muted, as though the world itself were holding its breath. Johnny Dawson stepped out of the livery after sunrise and saw Caleb Mercer standing alone in the middle of the street. He was not doing anything, not speaking, not moving. Just standing there with his hat in his hands, staring at the muddy ground beneath his boots. Several people were watching from a distance. No one went near him. Johnny crossed the street. Caleb looked up. His eyes were ringed with exhaustion. I didn't sleep. Johnny stopped beside him. Neither did I. Caleb gave a faint nod as if they were discussing weather. But the effort it took him to hold himself together was visible now. His calm had thinned. Something underneath it was beginning to show. Sarah brought him breakfast. He barely touched it. Coffee sat cooling in front of him. He stared into the dark surface as if expecting it to reveal something. Sarah took the chair across from him. "You need to eat." Caleb looked up. "Do I?" The question was quiet, not sarcastic, not bitter, a genuine uncertainty. Sarah did not answer immediately. At length she said, "I think so." Caleb picked up the spoon and forced himself to swallow a few bites. Halfway through, he set the spoon down. His hand was shaking. Johnny, watching from the window, saw Caleb glance toward the front door, then toward the back hallway, then toward the dark glass of the window beside him. As if he were measuring all the ways something might enter the room. Near noon, the first crack came. Caleb was standing at the counter speaking softly with May when he suddenly stopped. His expression changed, not dramatically, only a slight tightening around the eyes. He turned his head toward the empty stairway leading to the rooms above the cafe. Everyone in the room followed his gaze. There was nothing there. Caleb went pale. "What is it?" Sarah asked. Caleb did not answer. He was listening. Johnny rose from his chair. Caleb took one slow step backward. His voice was barely audible. "Did you hear that?" No one had heard anything. May looked frightened. JT moved closer to the door. Caleb continued staring toward the stairway. His breathing quickened. The room was perfectly silent. Then Caleb whispered, "It knows where I am." Johnny crossed the room and took him by the arm. Caleb blinked. The tension drained from his face. He looked around at the concerned expressions, at May, at Sarah, at Johnny's hand on his sleeve. His shoulders sagged. "I'm sorry," Johnny released him. "What did you hear?" Caleb swallowed. "Footsteps." He looked toward the stairs again. "Behind me." The afternoon passed uneasily. Caleb apologized to May. He tried to behave as though nothing had happened, but the strain in him was obvious now. He startled at ordinary sounds. He glanced over his shoulder. Once Johnny caught him standing before the front window, studying his own reflection. Caleb reached out and touched the glass. His hand paused there. Then he drew back sharply as if he had seen something that frightened him. Johnny stepped closer. "What is it?" Caleb stared at his reflection. For a moment he said nothing. Then he answered. "It looked like me." Johnny waited. Caleb's voice dropped, but not quite. That evening the storm broke. Rain lashed the town. Thunder rolled over the rooftops. The cafe was crowded with townspeople unwilling to face the weather. The atmosphere was tense but subdued. People spoke quietly. They kept one eye on Caleb. He sat at his usual table near the window. The storm illuminated his face in flashes of white light. Johnny sat nearby. Sarah worked behind the counter. Meng Chin sewed by the stove. For an hour nothing happened. Then lightning struck somewhere close enough to shake the building. The lamps flickered. For one heartbeat the cafe went dark. When the light returned, Caleb was standing. His chair lay overturned behind him. His face was drained of all color. He was staring into the rain-streaked window. Johnny rose instantly. "Caleb." Caleb took a step backward. His voice trembled. "It's here." Several people stood. JT moved toward him. "Easy." Caleb shook his head. His eyes never left the glass. "It's been behind me the whole time." Thunder boomed overhead. The lamps flickered again. Caleb lifted one shaking hand and pointed at the window. "I can see it." Johnny looked. The pane reflected the room. Rain, lamplight, the gathered faces, and Caleb Mercer. "Nothing else." Johnny turned back. "Caleb, there's nothing there." Caleb's eyes filled with terror. For the first time his composure shattered completely. "Yes," he whispered. "There is." He backed away from the window until he struck the wall. His chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. Sarah stepped forward. "Caleb." He looked at her. Something in her calm voice reached him. The panic drained from his face. Slowly, painfully, he looked around the room, at the frightened people, at Johnny, at Sarah, at his own trembling hands. His voice was little more than a whisper. "I shouldn't be here." The storm moved east during the night. By dawn, Rock Springs lay washed clean. Rainwater dripped from the eaves. The streets were dark with mud. Low clouds were breaking apart over the Wyoming hills, and narrow bands of sunlight touched the distant sage. Johnny Dawson had not slept. He sat alone on the boardwalk outside Sarah O'Malley's cafe, a cup of black coffee cooling in his hands. Inside, the lamps were still lit. Sarah moved quietly behind the counter. Meng Chin sat by the stove as she always did, her expression unreadable. No one spoke much. There was little left to say. When the cafe door opened, Johnny looked up. Caleb Mercer stepped out carrying his saddle. He had washed and shaved. His clothes were clean. He looked more like the man they remembered than at any point since his return. That somehow made this harder. Johnny rose to his feet. "You leaving?" Caleb set the saddle on the hitch rail and nodded. "I think that's best." Johnny studied him. The fear from the night before was gone. In its place was a quiet acceptance, not peace, but something close to it. Sarah stepped onto the boardwalk behind Johnny. She carried a cloth-wrapped bundle. "Food for the road." Caleb took it. Their fingers touched briefly. "Thank you." Sarah held his gaze. There was sadness in her eyes, but no fear now. "Where will you go?" Caleb looked west toward the open country. "I don't know." He managed a faint smile. "Far enough that whatever came with me won't trouble anyone here." Johnny glanced toward the empty street. "How do you know it'll follow?" Caleb tightened the strap on his saddle. "I don't," he paused, "but I know it stayed quiet until I came home." No one argued, because they all believed him. Robert and Anna arrived from the ranch. JT came from the livery. May stood just inside the cafe doorway. The small gathering said more than words could have. Caleb looked at each of them in turn. There was gratitude in his expression and regret. "I'm sorry." JT shifted his weight. "For what?" Caleb looked down briefly. "For bringing this to your door." Robert stepped forward and extended his hand. Caleb stared at it for a moment, then took it. Robert gripped his hand firmly. "Whatever happened, it wasn't your doing." Caleb nodded once. Anna touched his arm. "Travel safe." Caleb's eyes softened. "I'll try." Johnny helped him saddle the horse. The gelding remained nervous but did not panic. Perhaps even animals knew when a man was moving on. Caleb tightened the cinch and checked the bedroll. Johnny stood beside him in the cool morning air. After a moment, Johnny said, "You were my friend." Caleb kept his eyes on the saddle strap. "I still am." Johnny swallowed. "You understand why I had to ask?" Caleb looked at him. Johnny saw the same gray eyes he remembered from a dozen ordinary days. Yet now there was something deeper in them. The knowledge of a place no living man should see. "I know," Caleb said. Johnny hesitated. Then he asked, "If you find out what was behind you?" Caleb gave a faint, weary smile. "I don't intend to turn around." Johnny almost smiled in return. Almost. Caleb mounted. The horse shifted beneath him. He looked down at the people gathered on the boardwalk. Sarah, Meng Chin, Robert and Anna, JT May, Johnny, the town that had buried him, the town that had welcomed him back just long enough to let him go. Caleb touched the brim of his hat. "Goodbye," Sarah's voice was soft. "Goodbye, Caleb." No one else spoke. Words would have made it harder. Caleb turned the horse toward the western road. The morning sun broke through the clouds and cast long beams of light across the wet earth. He rode at a steady pace, not hurried, not hesitant, a solitary figure moving toward the open country. At the edge of town he paused. For one moment he sat motionless. Johnny thought he might look back. He did not. Caleb Mercer touched his heels to the horse and continued west until distance and sunlight swallowed him. The townspeople drifted away. Robert and Anna returned to the ranch. JT headed toward the livery. May went back inside the cafe. Sarah rested a hand briefly on Johnny's arm before re-entering. Only Meng Chin lingered. She stood beside Johnny on the boardwalk, watching the empty road. After a time, Johnny asked, "Do you think he'll find peace?" Meng Chin folded her hands. "If he keeps walking, perhaps." Johnny nodded. The answer felt right. He stood there until the last glimpse of horse and rider disappeared into the Wyoming hills. Then he turned toward the cafe. Before stepping inside, he looked once more at the western horizon. His voice was quiet, almost to himself. "We buried him once." He opened the door. Warm light spilled onto the boardwalk. Johnny stepped inside and closed it behind him. And this time, we didn't follow. For more stories from the Old West, subscribe to Tumbleweed Tales and join us for the next story.